For centuries, Zen masters have shared quiet truths about the art of acceptance and the flow of life. These are not teachings that require complex thought or deep analysis. They are simple, yet profound, truths that speak directly to our hearts. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in and perhaps share where you are and what time it is in your world. As we journey together through these stories, allow your breathing to become naturally slower and deeper. There is no need to rush, to understand everything perfectly, or to achieve anything at all. Let these ancient teachings simply wash over you like the gentle flow of a river. Each story we explore tonight invites you to discover the peace that comes with acceptance, the kind of peace that makes life feel lighter, like the effortless flow of water, and allows us to rest deeply at the end of each day. Zen wisdom reminds us that acceptance isn't something we must search for or fight to find. It is always here, within us, in this very moment. It is the quiet space between breaths. Relax. Take a slow, deep breath, and let's begin this journey together. Let's begin in a small, tranquil village, nestled between rolling hills and a gently flowing river. There lived a Zen master named Ryota. He was known far and wide for his deep understanding of life and the way he could help others find peace in the midst of their struggles. The river that ran through the village was a central part of his life, and he often spent time sitting by its banks, listening to its quiet, endless flow. It was here, in the stillness of nature, that many people came to him seeking guidance, looking for answers to the questions that weighed heavily on their hearts. One sunny afternoon, a young man named Akira arrived at the temple where Ryota lived. Akira was troubled. He had heard of the master's wisdom and hoped that he could find some peace for the restless turmoil that filled his mind. Akira had spent many months struggling with the challenges of life. He had tried countless times to fix his problems, but no matter what he did, things always seemed to slip out of his control. The harder he tried to push forward, the more obstacles appeared. He felt trapped, as though he were constantly fighting against something that he could never fully understand. When Akira saw Master Ryota, he immediately felt a sense of calm. The master sat quietly by the river, his eyes closed, listening to the flow of the water. It was as if the sound of the river spoke to him in a language that words could never express. Akira felt a small knot of tension loosen within him just by being in the presence of the Zen master. He took a deep breath and walked closer to him, sitting down on the ground nearby. "I have come to you, master," Akira began, his voice tinged with frustration, "because I feel like I cannot move forward in my life. Everything seems to be against me. I am like a stone stuck in the current of a river, unable to flow with life. I try to make decisions, to push myself, but it feels as though the river of life is always pushing me in the wrong direction." Ryota opened his eyes slowly, looking at Akira with a soft gaze. He didn't speak for a moment, simply observing the young man. Then, with a gentle smile, he pointed to the river beside them. The water flowed endlessly, winding around rocks and trees, moving with a constant, unwavering rhythm. "Akira," Ryota said, his voice calm and steady, "do you see the river? It is like life itself, always moving, never the same. It moves through everything, through the stones, the trees, the land. It does not ask for permission. It does not fight against what is in its path. It simply flows." Akira looked at the river, following the path of the water as it twisted and turned around rocks, gliding smoothly over the surface. He watched the water as it moved around obstacles, seeming to flow effortlessly. In his mind, he compared this to his own struggles. He felt like he was fighting against the current, trying to swim upstream, unable to find any peace. "Master, I see the river," Akira said slowly, "but I do not understand. The stone, as it sits in the water, does not move. It is stuck in place. How can I be like the stone and not resist the current?" Ryota smiled. a soft and knowing smile. He knew the pain that Akira was feeling. He had seen it before in many who came to him for help. It was a pain born of resistance, the constant struggle against what is, the desire to control what cannot be controlled. But Ryota also knew that the answer to Akira's suffering lay not in trying to force life to conform to his wishes, but in allowing himself to flow with the current, just as the river flows with ease. "The stone, Akira," Ryota said gently, "is indeed a part of the water. It may appear to be stuck, but it is carried by the flow. The water moves around it, over it, under it. The stone does not fight the current. It does not try to change the water. It simply allows the water to carry it along." Akira looked at the stone beneath the water's surface. He had never thought of it in this way before. The stone seemed so still, so unmoving, while the water danced and swirled around it. And yet, Ryota's words were starting to make sense. The stone was part of the flow. It was not separate from the water. It was being carried along with it, even if it didn't seem to move. "Are you saying that I must stop resisting life's flow?" Akira asked, his voice filled with both curiosity and doubt. "Yes," Ryota replied simply. "The water does not struggle to move. It does not try to change the stones or force them to go in a different direction. It simply flows, and everything it touches is carried along with it. You, too, must allow life to carry you. Stop fighting the current, and you will find peace." Akira sat in silence, contemplating the words of the Zen master. He thought about all the times he had struggled against life, trying to control the things he couldn't control. He had fought against his circumstances, against his fears, and against the choices he had made. But in doing so, he had only made his suffering worse. Ryota's words were beginning to sink in, and Akira felt a sense of relief. Perhaps there was another way. "But how do I stop fighting?" Akira asked quietly, his voice filled with a sense of vulnerability. "How do I let go of my need to control everything?" Ryota looked at Akira with compassion. He had asked the question that many ask when they begin their journey on the path of Zen. The answer was simple, yet it required deep trust. Trust in the flow of life. Trust that, by surrendering to the current, one could find a freedom that was not bound by struggle. "Let go of the need to control," Ryota said softly. "Trust that life will take you where you need to go. When you accept the flow, you do not fight against it. You simply become one with it, and in that oneness, you will find your freedom." Akira closed his eyes, taking in Ryota's words. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace beginning to settle in his heart. He realized that his struggles were born of his resistance, his unwillingness to accept what was. He had always thought that if he fought hard enough, if he tried hard enough, he could change everything. But now he understood that the key to peace lay in accepting life as it was, without resistance, without struggle. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the river, Akira stood up, feeling lighter. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill his lungs. The river continued to flow beside him, its movement smooth and constant. Akira looked at the water, feeling a sense of connection to it. He was not separate from the river. He was a part of it, just as the stone was a part of the water. "Thank you, Master," Akira said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I think I understand now." Ryota nodded, his eyes filled with kindness. "Remember, Akira, life will always be full of challenges. The current will always change. But when you stop fighting it, when you allow yourself to flow with life, you will find that everything becomes easier. You will no longer be the stone stuck in the current. You will become one with the water, flowing freely and effortlessly." Akira left the temple that evening with a new understanding of life. He no longer felt trapped or stuck. He had learned to trust the flow of existence and to accept it without resistance. From that day on, He allowed life to carry him, just as the river carried the stone. He no longer struggled against the current but moved with it, embracing the natural rhythm of life. As the years passed, Akira's life began to unfold in ways he had never imagined. His struggles did not disappear, but he no longer felt burdened by them. He had learned to face each challenge with acceptance, knowing that it was part of the flow of life, and in doing so, he found peace. The story of Akira and Ryota holds a powerful lesson for all of us. We, too, often find ourselves struggling against the current of life, trying to control things we cannot change. But the truth is that the more we fight, the more we struggle, and the more we suffer. When we learn to accept life as it is, without resistance, we can find the peace and freedom that comes with being one with the flow of existence. Just like the stone in the river, we, too, can learn to move with the current, finding our way through life with ease and grace. In a quiet Zen monastery nestled in the hills, there lived a young student named Suki. She had come to the monastery seeking peace, as many do, tired of the noise and confusion of the outside world. Here, among the simple life of the monks, she found solace, though her mind often remained restless. She had heard many teachings and practiced many meditations, but still, something within her was unsettled. One bright morning, after the morning bells had rung and the monks had finished their meditation, Suki walked to the Zen garden. The garden was her favorite place in the monastery, with its carefully raked sand, the rocks placed with intention, and the tall bamboo trees that reached up toward the sky. The bamboo was graceful, its thin, swaying stems dancing with the breeze. Suki would often sit by the bamboo, watching it move with the wind. There was something peaceful about the way it seemed to bend without breaking, allowing the wind to pass through it, only to stand tall once the storm had passed. On one particular day, a heavy wind blew through the garden, stronger than any Suki had felt before. The bamboo trees bent low under the pressure, their stems leaning far over as the wind howled through the garden. Suki watched in awe as the bamboo swayed in the wind, its leaves rustling, bending lower and lower with each gust. Yet, the bamboo did not break. It did not fight the wind. It simply bent, allowing the wind to pass through it. Curious, Suki turned to her teacher, Master Tetsuya, who had been watching the scene from a distance. She approached him and asked, "Master, why does the bamboo bend in the wind instead of resisting? Why doesn't it stand firm and refuse to yield to the pressure?" Master Tetsuya smiled softly, his eyes glinting with the wisdom of a lifetime spent in the pursuit of truth. He had heard many questions like Suki's before, but he never tired of answering them, for each question was an invitation to share the timeless wisdom of the Zen tradition. He motioned for Suki to sit beside him on the bench, where they could both watch the bamboo together. "The bamboo bends because it is flexible, Suki," Master Tetsuya said, his voice calm and steady. "It does not resist the wind. It allows the wind to pass through it, to move it. In its flexibility, it remains strong. If the saxability, as and of plate, bamboo were to stand rigid, refusing to bend, it would break under the pressure of the wind. But because it yields, it survives. It grows stronger through the act of yielding, not resisting." Suki's eyes widened as she listened to her teacher. She had always thought of strength as something solid and unyielding, like a mountain that could not be moved by any force. But now she was hearing that true strength might lie in being able to bend, to flow with the current of life, instead of fighting against it. "I see," Suki said slowly. "But Master, if the bamboo always bends, won't it lose its shape, its identity? Won't it lose itself by always yielding to the wind?" Master Tetsuya chuckled gently, a deep, knowing laugh that came from the depths of his being. "Ah, Suki," he said, "that is a question many ask. They believe that in yielding they will lose themselves, that they will be swallowed up by the forces around them. But in truth, when the bamboo bends, it does not lose itself. It remains true to its nature. The wind does not change the bamboo. The bamboo simply accepts the wind as it is, without trying to control it. And in doing so, it maintains its essence. It remains bamboo. Suki thought about this for a moment, watching the bamboo as it bent in the wind. She had always thought of herself as someone who needed to be strong and firm, someone who needed to stand tall and never be moved by the challenges of life. But the more she watched the bamboo, the more she realized that it was still the bamboo, even as it bent and swayed. The wind did not make it less bamboo, it simply made the bamboo more resilient. The bamboo's strength came from its ability to bend, to move with the wind, rather than resisting it. "Master," Suki said softly, "are you saying that life's challenges are like the wind, and that we should bend with them, instead of trying to fight them?" Master Tetsuya nodded. "Exactly, Suki. Life is full of winds, difficult moments, challenges, losses, and uncertainties. These winds will blow, sometimes gently and sometimes with great force. If we try to resist them, if we try to stand firm and unyielding in the face of them, we will break, just as the bamboo would break if it tried to stand against the wind. But if we can learn to bend, to accept the winds as they are, we will find our strength in yielding." Suki sat in silence, absorbing the wisdom of her master's words. She had always thought of herself as someone who needed to control her circumstances, to make things happen according to her will. But now, she saw that there was another way, one that involved acceptance, flexibility, and the ability to flow with the forces of life, rather than fighting against them. As the wind continued to blow, the bamboo in the garden bent and swayed, its leaves rustling in the breeze. Suki could feel the rhythm of the wind, the way it moved through the garden, touching everything in its path. It was as though the wind was a reminder, a lesson from nature, showing her the way. She understood now that it was not the wind that caused the bamboo to bend, it was the bamboo's willingness to bend, its openness to the wind, that allowed it to survive and thrive. "Master, how do we learn to bend like the bamboo?" Suki asked, her voice filled with curiosity. "How do we learn to accept the winds of life, instead of resisting them?" Master Tetsuya looked at her with a gentle smile. "The first step, Suki, is to realize that you cannot control the wind. Life will always bring its challenges, its ups and downs. You cannot predict what will come or when it will arrive, but you can control how you respond to it. If you resist, you will suffer. But if you bend, you will flow with life, and in that flow, you will find peace." Suki nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. She had spent so much time trying to control everything around her, trying to make life bend to her will. But now she understood that true peace came from yielding, from accepting the winds of life, and trusting that they would carry her to where she needed to go. As the day turned into evening, Suki sat in the garden, watching the bamboo continue to bend with the wind. The evening sun cast a warm golden light over the garden, and the bamboo seemed to glow in the fading light. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lesson the bamboo had taught her. It was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. In the days that followed, Suki began to apply this lesson in her own life. When challenges arose, when the winds of life blew strong, she no longer tried to fight them. Instead, she remembered the bamboo and allowed herself to bend with the wind, to flow with life rather than resist it. She found that in doing so, she became stronger, more at peace, and more connected to the natural flow of existence. One day, while sitting in the garden, Master Tetsuya approached her with a knowing smile. "Suki," he said, "you have learned the lesson of the bamboo. You have learned to bend with the wind, to accept life as it is. This is the way of peace." Suki smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude in her heart. "Thank you, Master," she said. "I have learned that in bending with life, I can find my true strength. I no longer need to fight the wind. I can simply flow with it. And so, Suki's journey continued, guided by the wisdom of the bamboo. She learned that strength did not come from resisting life, but from accepting it fully, from bending with the wind, and from trusting that the flow of life would carry her to where she needed to go. Years later, Suki would return to the monastery to visit Master Tetsuya. She would often sit by the bamboo in the garden, remembering the lessons she had learned and the peace she had found in accepting the winds of life. And whenever she faced a challenge, she would remember the bamboo and the way it bent in the wind, trusting that, in yielding, she would find her true strength. Hiroshi was a young scholar, eager to learn, to explore the depths of knowledge. He had spent many years reading books, studying ancient texts, and debating with other scholars, hoping to find the key to the mysteries of life. But despite all his learning, something was missing. He felt as though he had reached the limits of his understanding, and no matter how many books he read or questions he asked, he was never truly satisfied. He longed for something deeper, something beyond the words and ideas that filled his mind. One day, Hiroshi heard about a Zen master named Kaito, who was known far and wide for his wisdom. People said that Master Kaito had the ability to reveal the deepest truths with the simplest of actions. Intrigued, Hiroshi decided that he must visit the master and seek his guidance. He hoped that Kaito would provide him with the answers to the questions that had been troubling him for so long. The journey to Master Kaito's temple was long and tiring, but Hiroshi didn't mind. He was filled with excitement and anticipation. As he approached the temple, he could see the peaceful gardens and the simple, humble structure of the building. Everything seemed calm and serene, a stark contrast to the restlessness that filled his mind. Upon arriving, Hiroshi was greeted by the Zen master, who invited him to sit and have tea. Master Kaito was a man of few words, and his presence seemed to radiate a quiet, steady energy. He didn't ask Hiroshi about his travels or the questions that had brought him to the temple. Instead, he simply went about the task of preparing tea. Hiroshi sat down, eager to begin. His mind was filled with so many questions, and he couldn't wait to share them with the master. He thought about asking about the nature of life, the meaning of suffering, the secrets of the universe. But before he could say a word, Master Kaito began to pour tea into his cup. The tea flowed smoothly, filling the cup with the warm liquid. But Kaito did not stop. He continued to pour, and soon the tea began to overflow, spilling onto the table. Hiroshi watched in shock as the tea poured over the sides of the cup, pooling on the table. "Master, stop! The cup is full!" Hiroshi cried, alarmed at the mess. But Master Kaito did not stop pouring. He continued to pour the tea, the liquid flowing over the edges of the cup and onto the table. Hiroshi stood up in a flurry, his mind racing. What was happening? Why wasn't the master listening to him? The tea kept spilling, and Hiroshi could feel his frustration building. Finally, after a long pause, Master Kaito stopped. He set the teapot down and looked at Hiroshi with a calm, steady gaze. The tea continued to spill onto the table, but Kaito seemed entirely unaffected by the mess. "Your mind is like this cup," Kaito said quietly. "You come to me full of questions, but until you empty yourself, no new knowledge can enter." Hiroshi stared at the overflowing cup, his thoughts swirling. He was confused. What did the master mean? His mind was full of questions, yes, but he had come to seek knowledge. How could he empty himself? Wasn't that the whole purpose of his visit? To fill his mind with wisdom? Kaito continued, his voice soft but clear. "You are like this cup, full to the brim. You are so full of your own ideas and thoughts that there is no space for anything new to enter. Just as the tea cannot fill the cup while it is already overflowing, knowledge cannot enter your mind while it is already full." Hiroshi felt a wave of understanding wash over him. He realized that for all his learning, He had never truly emptied his mind. He had been so focused on accumulating more knowledge that he had never stopped to consider whether he was truly open to receiving it. He had been filling his cup, but he had never emptied it to make room for something new. Master Kaito's words settled deeply within him. Hiroshi realized that his mind had been so preoccupied with seeking answers that he had failed to truly listen. He had come to the master expecting to be filled, but he had never stopped to consider whether he was open to being emptied first. Kaito's gaze softened. "You come to me with your questions, your thoughts, your knowledge, but to learn, you must first let go of what you think you know. Only then can you make room for something greater, something deeper. If your mind is always full, how can you hear the truth?" Hiroshi sat down slowly, the weight of the master's words pressing gently on his heart. He had always been focused on the need to know, the need to understand everything, but now he understood that true knowledge came not from accumulating answers, but from allowing the space for wisdom to enter. It wasn't about gathering more and more facts or ideas. It was about letting go of the clutter in his mind and being open to the simplicity of what was before him. "Master," Hiroshi said softly, his voice filled with newfound clarity, "how do I empty my mind?" Kaito smiled gently, his eyes filled with quiet wisdom. "You empty your mind by letting go of your attachment to knowledge. You let go of your need to be right, your desire to control what you know. You allow yourself to be open, to listen without judgment, without expectation. In that openness, you will find the truth." Hiroshi sat in silence, reflecting on what the master had said. He realized that in his quest for knowledge, he had been grasping at ideas and concepts, trying to fill himself with answers. But now he saw that true wisdom didn't come from holding on tightly to the things he thought he knew. It came from letting go, from emptying himself of preconceived notions and allowing the present moment to reveal its own truth. Master Kaito continued to sit quietly beside him, the tea still spilling onto the table. Though the master seemed entirely at peace, Hiroshi looked at the teapot, at the overflowing cup, and understood that his mind had been like that cup full of ideas, expectations, and desires. It wasn't until he let go of his attachment to these things that he would be able to truly receive new knowledge. The next morning, Hiroshi woke early, before the sun had risen. He walked through the temple grounds, his mind calmer, quieter than it had been in years. He had learned that true knowledge wasn't about filling his mind with more information, it was about emptying it of the things that cluttered it, allowing himself to be present, to be open, and to listen. In the days that followed, Hiroshi practiced what Master Kaito had taught him. He let go of his need to accumulate knowledge, to be the smartest person in the room. Instead, he began to approach life with a sense of openness, of curiosity. He allowed himself to listen, truly listen, to the world around him, to the people he met, and to the stillness of his own mind. One afternoon, Master Kaito invited him back to the tea table. This time, when Hiroshi sat down, there was no rush, no urgency to speak. He was simply present. Master Kaito poured tea into his cup. But this time, Hiroshi held the cup steady, knowing that it wasn't about how much tea he could hold, but about the space he allowed to be filled. As Master Kaito poured the tea, Hiroshi felt the warmth of the liquid fill the cup, and in that simple moment, he understood. The cup did not need to be overflowing. It only needed to be full enough to hold what was necessary. Just as his mind did not need to be full of answers, it only needed to be open enough to receive the wisdom of the present moment. Hiroshi sat back, a quiet smile forming on his face. He realized that in emptying his mind, he had made space for true knowledge to enter. And in that openness, he found peace. Years later, people would come to Hiroshi, eager to hear his teachings. They would ask him about the secrets of wisdom, about the mysteries of life. And with a gentle smile, Hiroshi would always say the same thing: I learned from a wise man that a full cup cannot hold anything new. You must first empty yourself, and only then will you find the space to receive what is truly important. On a warm summer afternoon, the sun cast long shadows across the temple grounds. The air was still, and the sounds of the birds and rustling trees were the only things that could be heard. A young monk named Shinji sat outside, gazing at the distant mountains that rose proudly against the sky. Shinji had spent many years at the temple, and yet there were still many questions that filled his mind. Today, as he sat by himself, he found his thoughts turning to the great mountains before him. The mountains were vast and unyielding, stretching far into the horizon, their peaks hidden by clouds. Shinji often marveled at their majesty. But today, as he sat in the warmth of the afternoon, his thoughts were drawn to something else, the clouds. He had always been fascinated by how the clouds floated above the mountains, drifting without effort, moving through the sky as though they had no care in the world. They seemed to be free, while the mountains, though strong and steady, appeared immovable. Shinji turned to his teacher, Master Yuto, who was sitting nearby, lost in thought. The master had lived in the temple for many years and was known for his deep wisdom. He had taught many students, but Shinji always felt that his teachings held a special meaning, even though sometimes the lessons were not immediately clear. "Master," Shinji began, his voice filled with curiosity, "why do the clouds float so effortlessly above the mountains?" Master Yuto looked up at the mountains for a moment, his expression calm and serene. Then he turned to Shinji and smiled gently. "The mountain does not struggle to rise," he said slowly, "nor does the cloud fight to stay. Both accept their place in the world, and thus they are at peace." Shinji thought for a moment, trying to understand what his master was saying. "But master," he asked, "the mountain is solid and unchanging. The cloud is light and constantly moving. How can they both be at peace if they are so different?" Master Yuto chuckled softly and stood up. He gestured for Shinji to follow him, and the two began to walk toward the temple garden. As they walked, the master spoke again. "Shinji," Yuto said, "the mountain and the cloud have very different natures. The mountain is firm and unmoving, while the cloud is light and free. But each has its own place in the world, and each does what it is meant to do. The mountain does not wish to float in the sky, and the cloud does not wish to stand firm like the mountain. Both accept who they are, and because of this, they are at peace." Shinji listened carefully, but the lesson was not immediately clear to him. He had always thought that peace came from strength and perseverance, from standing firm like the mountain. But now, Master Yuto seemed to be telling him that peace could also come from yielding, from flowing, from being like the cloud. Shinji felt a little confused, but knew that his master's words were important. "Master, if the cloud is so light and free, and the mountain is so heavy and still, how do they both find peace?" Shinji asked again, hoping to understand more fully. Master Yuto stopped walking and turned to face the young monk. "Shinji," he said gently, "peace does not come from struggle. It does not come from forcing things to be a certain way. Peace comes from accepting what is. The cloud does not fight to stay above the mountain, and the mountain does not try to rise higher than the clouds. Both are at peace because they accept their place in the world." Shinji's mind began to shift, and he could feel the weight of the words settle in his heart. He had always believed that peace was something that came from striving, from pushing against life's challenges. He had thought that in order to be at peace, he had to be strong like the mountain, never bending, never yielding. But now, Master Yuto was showing him a different path. Perhaps peace was not something to be achieved through struggle. Perhaps it came from simply accepting the flow of life. They continued walking through the garden, and Shinji began to feel a sense of lightness in his heart. He looked up at the sky and saw the clouds moving effortlessly, drifting on the breeze. There was something so simple, so graceful about the way they floated. It was as if they had no worries, no concerns. They were simply being, and in their being they were at peace. Shinji turned to his master and asked, "Master, how do we learn to accept our place in the world? How do we learn to be like the cloud, floating freely without struggle?" Master Yuto smiled again, a look of quiet understanding in his eyes. "Shinji," he said softly, "we cannot force acceptance. It comes when we learn to let go of our desires, our expectations, and our attachments. It comes when we stop trying to control everything around us and simply allow life to unfold as it is meant to. Like the mountain, we stand firm in our place. Like the cloud, we let go and allow ourselves to move freely with the wind. When we accept our place in the world, we are no longer fighting against the current of life. We are at peace with it." Shinji thought about this for a long time. He had always believed that he had to fight to achieve peace, that he had to prove his worth by being strong and unyielding. But now, he realized that true strength lay not in resisting life, but in surrendering to it. Peace was not something that could be forced. It was something that came when he learned to accept what was, when he stopped fighting against life's currents and allowed himself to float freely, like the cloud. As the sun began to set and the sky turned a soft orange, Shinji felt a sense of quiet understanding within himself. He had spent so many years trying to be something he was not, trying to control his life and his circumstances. But now he understood that peace came from accepting his true nature, just as the mountain accepted its place and the cloud accepted its freedom. Master Yuto stood beside him, watching the clouds drift across the sky. "Shinji," he said, "when we accept our own place, we too will float above life's struggles. We will no longer be weighed down by the burden of trying to control everything around us. We will find peace in the simplicity of being." Shinji nodded, his heart filled with gratitude. He understood now that peace was not something that could be achieved through force or struggle. It was something that came when he let go of his need to control and allowed himself to be. Like the mountain and the cloud, he could find his place in the world and accept it with grace. As they returned to the temple, Shinji felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of his many questions had begun to lift. He no longer felt the need to fight against the world, to struggle to find his place. He understood now that peace was not something to be attained by doing it, was something to be found by simply being. The next day, Shinji sat in the garden once again, watching the clouds float above the mountains. This time, he felt a deep sense of connection to them. He was no longer looking at them as separate from himself. He was the mountain, firm and strong in his place, and he was the cloud, light and free in his surrender. Together, they existed in harmony, each accepting its own role in the vastness of the world. In the days that followed, Shinji practiced this new understanding. He let go of his need to control everything around him. He allowed himself to flow with life, to accept his place in the world without resistance. As he did, he found that his heart became lighter, his mind clearer, and his spirit more at peace. He was no longer burdened by the weight of his own expectations. He had learned to accept life as it came, and in doing so, he had found the peace that had always been within him. Master Yuto's teachings had shown him the way, and Shinji would carry them with him for the rest of his life. The mountain and the cloud had taught him the greatest lesson of all, that peace comes not from struggle, but from acceptance. When we accept our place in the world, we, too, will float above life's struggles, free and at peace. Taro was a young novice monk who had only recently arrived at the temple. The peaceful surroundings and the simple life of a monk had drawn him to this place, where he hoped to find clarity and direction for his life. The temple was nestled beside a great river which flowed quietly through the valley, winding its way through the landscape. Taro spent much of his time sitting by the riverbank, watching the water flow by, its current steady and constant, never hesitating or looking back. Yet, despite the serenity around him, Taro felt restless. His mind was filled with questions, and he could not find peace. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and cast a soft golden light over the river, Taro stood on the riverbank, lost in thought. The water flowed before him, but his mind felt still, unmoving. He was troubled. It was as though his life had come to a standstill. He had been practicing the teachings of the monks and following the disciplined routine of his days, but inside he felt stuck. His heart was full of questions, but the answers seemed just out of reach. He didn't know how to move forward. Every path seemed unclear, and every choice felt overwhelming. His master, Zenji, walked up beside him, noticing the young monk's troubled expression. Zenji had spent many years studying the ways of Zen, and his wisdom was known throughout the temple. He had seen many students come and go, each carrying their own burdens, seeking peace and understanding. Zenji was patient, never hasty to offer advice unless it was needed. He knew that Taro's struggles were part of his journey, and that the young monk would come to find his own answers in time. "What is troubling you, my son?" Zenji asked, his voice gentle, yet full of the quiet authority that comes with a deep understanding of the world. Taro sighed deeply, as though the weight of the world had settled in his chest. He looked at his master, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "I do not know how to move forward in life, master. I feel stagnant, as if I am standing still while the world around me keeps moving." Zenji nodded, understanding the frustration that Taro was feeling. He had experienced that same feeling in his youth, when he had struggled to understand his place in the world. The river beside them flowed endlessly, as it always had. But for Taro, it seemed that his own flow had come to a halt. Zenji gestured for Taro to walk with him along the riverbank. They walked side by side, the sound of the water filling the air. The sun's light danced on the surface of the river, creating sparkling patterns on the water's surface. As they walked, Zenji spoke. "The river never hesitates," Zenji said, his voice calm and steady. "It simply flows. The water does not stop to consider where it is going or to ask why it must flow in a particular direction. It does not hesitate or worry about the obstacles it may encounter. It just flows. This is how life is meant to be lived, my son." Taro listened carefully, but his mind was still clouded with confusion. "But master," Taro said, "I do not understand. The river flows, yes, but it has no choice in the matter. It has no will or purpose. It simply follows its course. How can I be like the river? How can I move forward when I do not know where to go?" Zenji smiled gently, his eyes filled with a quiet wisdom that came from years of experience. "The river does not question its path, Taro," he said. "It moves with the flow of nature. It accepts the present moment as it is, without resistance. This is why the river is always moving, always flowing forward. It is not concerned with what lies ahead. It is not concerned with the past. It simply moves with the current, and in that movement it finds its way." Taro felt a shift in his heart, but it was not yet clear. "But how can I simply accept the present moment?" he asked. "How can I move forward when I do not know what lies ahead? I feel like I am constantly trying to force something, trying to make a decision, trying to understand everything, but it only leaves me feeling more lost." Zenji stopped walking and looked out over the river, watching the water flow past. The river never hesitated, never fought against the current. It simply was. "Taro," Zenji said softly, "the river does not struggle with the present moment. It does not try to change its course. It accepts where it is and trusts that it will find its way. The river is at peace because it does not resist what is. It simply flows." Taro stood still for a moment, taking in his master's words. The river before him was so simple in its movement, so natural. It did not question where it was going, nor did it worry about the obstacles that lay ahead. It simply accepted the moment, one flowing current after another, trusting that it was exactly where it needed to be. Taro began to feel a sense of peace, a stillness that he had not known before. His mind, so cluttered with questions, began to settle. Zenji continued, "Your life too is like the river. You do not need to know exactly where you are going or what lies ahead. You do not need to force yourself to understand everything. What you need to do is accept the present moment just as it is, without resistance. The moment you stop fighting the current of life, you will find that you can move forward naturally." Taro looked down at the river, his eyes following the water's movement. He saw the way it flowed, effortlessly, the way it embraced each curve, each turn, without hesitation. The water did not question the obstacles that came its way. It simply flowed around them, finding its path with grace and ease. "I see now, Master," Taro said quietly. "I have been fighting the flow of my life, trying to make things happen, trying to control my path. But I realize now that I do not need to force it. I only need to trust the present moment and let life flow as it will." Zenji smiled, pleased with his student's understanding. "Yes, Taro, the river does not worry about what lies ahead. It does not try to change its course. It simply moves with what is. When you accept the present moment, you too will move forward naturally, without struggle, without resistance. Just as the river flows, you will find your way." Taro felt a deep sense of calm wash over him. The confusion and restlessness that had clouded his mind began to clear. He understood now that he did not need to have all the answers, nor did he need to control everything. Life, like the river, would unfold as it was meant to. All he needed to do was accept the present moment, trust in the flow, and move forward without hesitation. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a soft glow across the river, Taro felt a deep sense of peace. The river's steady flow mirrored the quiet acceptance in his heart. He no longer felt the need to force things or to worry about what lay ahead. He had learned that true peace came from accepting life as it was, in the present moment. From that day forward, Taro approached each moment with a new understanding. He no longer fought against the current of life. Instead, he moved with it, trusting that it would carry him to where he needed to go. The river had taught him a valuable lesson: to accept the present, to flow with life, and to trust that everything would unfold as it should. And so, Taro continued his journey, no longer burdened by the weight of uncertainty, but free in the flow of life. Each step he took was light, each moment filled with peace. The river, like the present moment, carried him forward, naturally and effortlessly. He no longer struggled, for he had learned the true power of acceptance. Years later, Taro would return to the riverbank, now an older monk, and reflect on the lesson he had learned all those years ago. The river, as it always had, flowed steadily beside him. It had never hesitated, never resisted, and in its flow, it had found its way. Taro, too, had found his way by accepting the present moment, moving forward with ease and grace, trusting in the flow of life. And in that trust, he had found peace. In a small village nestled in the hills, there lived a kind woman named Hana. Every day, she would walk to the river to fill 2 large pots with water. The sun would rise early, and Hana, with her long braided hair and simple clothes, would begin her walk, the cool morning air on her face. She carried the pots carefully, balanced on a wooden pole that rested across her shoulders. She would walk back to her house, carefully navigating the winding paths that led through the village. One of the pots was new, solid, and held water perfectly. The other was cracked. Hana had used this pot for many years. Despite its age, it was still functional, though it leaked a small amount of water along the way. Each time she made the journey, the cracked pot would lose a little more of its contents, leaving a small trail of water behind her. The new pot, on the other hand, carried its full load without any problem. One day, as Hana was returning home with her 2 pots, her neighbor, Jiro, was working in his garden. He noticed the water dripping from the cracked pot and called out to Hana, who was slowly making her way up the path. "Hana," Jiro said, "why do you continue to use this cracked pot? Why not replace it with a new one like the other? It's wasting water, and it's not doing its job properly." Hana smiled gently, setting the pots down beside the flowers in her garden. She knew that Jiro often had a practical way of looking at things. To him, the cracked pot was a problem, something that needed to be fixed or replaced. He did not see the beauty in its imperfection, as she did. "The cracked pot has its own purpose," Hana said, her voice calm and filled with understanding. "It may leak water, but it also leaves a trail of water behind me. As I walk, it nourishes the flowers along the path. It brings life to them in a way that the other pot cannot. Even in its imperfection, it serves a purpose. The flowers would not grow as they do without the water it leaves behind." Jiro looked at the flowers, which bloomed brightly along the path where Hana walked. They were beautiful, their petals vibrant with life. He had never thought about the cracked pot in that way. To him, it had always seemed like a burden, something that needed to be fixed or replaced. But now, he saw that the pot was doing something the other pot could not. It was leaving something behind, a gift that nourished the flowers. Hana continued, her eyes gentle and wise. "You see, Jiro, in life, we all have our cracks and imperfections. But these imperfections are not something to be ashamed of. They are part of what makes us who we are. Just like this pot, we have flaws. But those flaws can bring beauty and life to the world in ways we might not always understand." Jiro stood quietly, thinking about Hana's words. He had always believed that perfection was the goal, that only things that were whole and unbroken were valuable. But Hana was teaching him something different, that even in imperfection, there could be beauty, and even the broken parts of life could be a source of nourishment for others. Hana's smile deepened as she gestured to the flowers. "Do you see how the flowers grow so well along the path? The cracked pot is not just a broken vessel, it is a tool of nature, a way of bringing life to something that might otherwise be forgotten. Its flaw, its imperfection, creates the space for something new to grow. The water that drips from it feeds the earth, giving life to the flowers. In that, there is beauty." Jiro nodded slowly, his mind opening to a new way of thinking. He had always focused on the need to fix things, to make them perfect, but he now realized that perhaps there was something deeper in Hana's way of seeing the world. Perhaps the imperfections of life were not to be feared or avoided, but embraced. "The broken pot brings beauty," Jiro said softly, repeating the words in his mind. "It nourishes the flowers in a way that the other pot cannot." Hana's eyes sparkled with a gentle wisdom. "Exactly, Jiro. The pot's imperfection is not a curse, but a blessing. It shows us that even in our brokenness, we can contribute to the world in meaningful ways. The flowers do not mind that the water comes from a cracked pot. They accept it as it is, and they grow." Jiro stood there for a long time, taking in what Hana had shared with him. He had always seen the world in terms of what was perfect and what was broken, what was complete and what was lacking. But now, he understood that the broken pot, in all its imperfection, was a symbol of how life works. In the gaps, in the cracks, in the places where things seem incomplete, there can be beauty and growth. From that day on, Jiro's perspective began to shift. He saw the world around him with new eyes. He began to understand that the cracks in life, the mistakes, the moments of failure, They all had their place in the world. They were not things to hide or fix, but things to learn from, things to embrace. The flowers along Hana's path flourished, not despite the cracked pot, but because of it. The broken pot's imperfection allowed it to leave behind a trail of water that nourished the earth, bringing life to something that would not have thrived without it. As for Hana, she continued her daily walks with her 2 pots. She did not see her cracked pot as a problem, but as a reminder of the flow of life. Everything in life is impermanent, and nothing is perfect. And yet, in that imperfection, there is always beauty, always a purpose. Even the smallest cracks can create something beautiful, something that nourishes others. Years passed, and the village grew. Hana's garden flourished, its flowers bright and full of life. The trail of water from her cracked pot continued to nourish the earth, and the villagers marveled at the beauty of the flowers along the path. They would often stop to admire the vibrant colors and the delicate petals, unaware of the small, quiet act that made it all possible. Jiro, too, learned to see the beauty in imperfection. He began to accept the things that were not perfect in his life, understanding that flaws were not failures, but opportunities for growth. Like the flowers that grew along Hana's path, he began to bloom in his own way, embracing his own imperfections and allowing them to nourish his soul. One day, many years later, Jiro walked to Hana's house to visit her. He had grown older and his hair had turned grey, but his heart was still full of the lessons he had learned from the wise woman. As he walked the familiar path, he noticed the flowers that still grew along the way, their colors just as bright as they had been all those years ago. And there, at the end of the path, was Hana, still carrying her 2 pots. "Hana," Jiro called, smiling as he approached her. "I've come to thank you once again for the lesson you taught me so many years ago. I've learned that even in our brokenness, there is beauty. Your cracked pot has shown me that imperfection is not something to be ashamed of, but something to embrace." Hana smiled, her eyes soft and kind. She had lived a full life, but she knew that the lesson she had shared with Jiro had left a lasting mark on his heart. "Jiro," she said, "you have understood the lesson. The broken pot brings beauty because it allows life to flow. It is through our cracks that we connect with the world, that we nourish others. We do not have to be perfect to make a difference. Our imperfections are what make us whole." As the sun set behind the mountains, casting a warm glow over the village, Jiro and Hana stood together, watching the flowers along the path. The beauty of the garden was not just in the flowers, but in the lessons they carried. And in that moment, both Jiro and Hana knew that, just like the water from the cracked pot, their lives had left a trail of beauty behind them. The story of Hana and her broken pot teaches us that perfection is not the goal of life. We do not have to be flawless to make a difference in the world. It is in our cracks, in our imperfections, that the beauty of life flows. Just as the broken pot nourished the flowers along the path, so too can our own imperfections nourish the world around us. When we accept our flaws, we allow ourselves to be part of the flow of life, bringing beauty and meaning to all we touch. Even in imperfection, there is a flow of life. In a peaceful Zen temple, nestled in the hills where the air was fresh and the world moved slowly, there lived a young monk named Daichi. He had come to the temple to learn the ways of Zen, seeking wisdom and peace from his master, Yuto. Daichi was eager to understand the deeper truths of life. But like many young monks, he was full of questions, restless with the desire to grasp the teachings quickly. Master Yuto was a patient man, one who had spent many years cultivating a calm and still mind. He knew that the path to peace was not rushed, and that wisdom would come when Daichi was ready to receive it. Each day, Daichi followed his master's instructions, performing the simple tasks that made up the daily routine of temple life. Among these tasks was one that Daichi had been asked to do every morning: to rake the Zen garden. The Zen garden was a beautiful, quiet space filled with smooth stones, tiny raked sand patterns, and carefully placed rocks. It was a place of simplicity, yet it held a deep meaning. Master Yuto had told Daichi that raking the garden was a way to clear the mind, to find stillness, and to connect with the present moment. At first, Daichi found the task soothing. The rhythmic motion of the rake, the gentle brushing of the sand, brought him a sense of calm. But after a few days, Daichi began to feel frustrated. He would rake the garden in the same pattern every time, moving the rake in the same way, back and forth. The sand would look neat and orderly, but as soon as the wind blew or someone stepped on it, the patterns would be disturbed, and Daichi would have to start all over again. One morning, after days of raking the same patterns, Daichi approached Master Yuto with a question that had been bothering him. He had been raking the garden, but he wasn't sure if it was making any difference. "Master," Daichi said, his voice tinged with frustration, "why do I rake the garden in the same pattern every time? Doesn't it seem pointless? Every time I finish, the wind blows or someone walks through, and the patterns are gone. Why do I keep doing this?" Master Yuto looked at Daichi with a gentle smile. He had been waiting for this question. His answer would not come in words alone, but in the experience of the task itself. "The purpose is not the pattern itself, Daichi," Yuto said slowly, his voice calm and steady. "The purpose is the act of raking. In the simple, repetitive motion, there is acceptance and flow. Do the task fully, and you will see its wisdom." Daichi looked at his master, unsure of what he meant. He had expected a more direct answer, perhaps a deeper explanation of the meaning behind the garden or the raking. But Yuto's words seemed to suggest that there was something more in the process itself, in the act of doing the task without focusing on the results. "Do the task fully," Yuto repeated. "When you rake, do not think about the pattern or about what will happen to the garden after you finish. Focus only on the raking. In the motion of the rake, in the sound of it moving through the sand, there is a rhythm, there is an acceptance of what is. This is the way of Zen." Daichi was quiet, still unsure. He had been focused so much on the results, on the perfect pattern in the sand, that he had not been present in the task itself. He had been thinking of the end goal, and in doing so, had missed the beauty in the process. Master Yuto continued, "When you rake, you are not just making patterns in the sand. You are clearing your mind. You are bringing your attention to the present moment, letting go of everything else. The pattern in the sand is not important. What matters is the experience of raking, the movement, the sound, the flow of the action. When you let go of the need to control the result, you can experience the peace in the task itself." Daichi stood still for a moment, letting the words sink in. He looked down at the garden, the sand that had been raked the same way every day, but now he saw something different. He saw the simplicity in the task. He saw the beauty in the motion of the rake, the way it moved smoothly through the sand, creating gentle lines. He saw the way the wind would come and shift the patterns, only to have them return again when he raked once more. It was not about achieving a perfect, unchanging design. It was about the process, the constant motion, the rhythm, the way the garden could never be fixed or permanent, but always alive and changing. The garden, like life itself, was always in motion, always moving, and that was its beauty. The next morning, Daichi approached the Zen garden with a new perspective. This time, he did not focus on the patterns he was making. He simply raked, feeling the motion of the rake, listening to the sound as it moved through the sand. The repetitive task became a meditation. Each stroke of the rake was a moment of presence. Each moment was enough. He stopped thinking about the wind or about the footsteps that might disturb the sand. He stopped worrying about the result and focused on the doing. As he raked, Daichi felt a sense of calm that he had not felt before. His mind, which had been filled with questions and doubts, became still. In the act of raking, he found peace. The garden, in all its simplicity, became a mirror for his own mind. Just as the garden changed with each stroke, so too did his mind, becoming more clear and peaceful with each passing moment. The task was not to be done perfectly, but to be done with attention, with presence. Master Yuto watched from a distance, seeing the change in Daichi. The young monk had learned something important, not just about raking the garden, but about life itself. Life was not about the results, the perfect patterns we try to create. It was about the flow, the present moment, and the ability to engage fully in what we are doing without worry about what comes next. As Daichi finished raking the garden, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from the patterns he had created, but from the experience of the task itself. He realized that the beauty of the garden was not in the final result, but in the process. Just like life, the garden was constantly changing, constantly in motion, and that was where its true beauty lay. Later that day, Daichi approached Master Yuto once more. This time, his face was calm and clear, his eyes filled with understanding. "Master," Daichi said, "I understand now. It was never about the patterns in the sand. It was about the act of raking, about being fully present in the moment. When I stopped focusing on the result, I found peace in the process itself." Yuto smiled, pleased with his student's realization. "Yes, Daichi. When you engage fully in what you are doing, without attachment to the outcome, you experience the flow of life. Just as the garden is always changing, so too are we. The task is not to control that flow, but to accept it, to be in harmony with it." Daichi nodded, his heart light with the wisdom he had gained. He understood now that life was not about striving for perfection or trying to control everything. It was about accepting the present moment, engaging fully in what you are doing, and finding peace in the process. In the days that followed, Daichi continued to rake the garden with a new sense of purpose. The repetitive task became a meditation, a way to center himself, to find peace in the rhythm of life. And as he raked, he began to see the garden in a new light, not as something that needed to be perfect, but as something that was always in motion, always changing, always alive. The Zen garden had taught him the most important lesson of all, that peace is not something we achieve, but something we experience in the present moment, through simple acts of attention and acceptance. Just as the sand in the garden was shaped by each stroke of the rake, so too was Daichi's mind shaped by his ability to be present and to flow with the rhythms of life. Years later, when Daichi became a master himself, he would teach his students the same lesson he had learned from Master Yuto. He would show them the Zen garden, the rake, and the simple act of raking. And he would tell them that true wisdom lies not in the patterns we try to create, but in the way we engage with the present moment, fully and without expectation. In the flow of life, there is peace. Kaito was a young monk at a quiet Zen temple nestled in the mountains. His presence was peaceful, and his actions were calm, yet he was known for speaking little. The other monks had grown accustomed to his quiet nature, but visitors often found his silence curious. They would wonder about him, sometimes asking the other monks why he said so little, and some would even try to coax him into speaking more. But Kaito remained undisturbed by their questions, always calm, always observing. One bright afternoon, a traveler arrived at the temple. He had heard of the peacefulness of the monks and was curious about the Zen teachings. The traveler, feeling the weight of his own restless mind, had come seeking answers. After some time spent in the temple, and having witnessed Kaito's quiet demeanor, the visitor finally approached the young monk, intrigued. "Kaito," the visitor said politely, "I have watched you for several days now. You speak so rarely, and I cannot help but wonder why. Why do you speak so little? Isn't there wisdom to be shared with others? I have heard that silence is powerful, but surely words also carry power. Why not speak more often? Kaito looked up at the traveler, his eyes calm and his expression serene. He had heard this question many times before, but he never grew tired of answering it. He stood silently for a moment, his mind still, and then he replied, his voice as gentle as a soft breeze. Words are like raindrops, they fall and fade. Silence, however, is like the sky. It embraces everything without judgment, just as acceptance and flow embrace the essence of life. The traveler was quiet, unsure of how to respond. He had never thought about words in such a way. He had always valued speech, believing that words could express thoughts, convey feelings, and solve problems. But Kaito's response gave him pause. Words, like raindrops, fell and were gone. But silence was like the sky, always present, always vast, and open to everything. What do you mean by that, Kaito? The traveler asked, still seeking to understand. How is silence like the sky? How does silence embrace everything without judgment? Kaito smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with gentle wisdom. He gestured for the traveler to walk with him, and they began to walk through the temple grounds, past the tranquil pond and the carefully tended garden. As they walked, Kaito spoke once more. Words are limited, and once spoken, they disappear. They may offer clarity for a moment, but they fade as quickly as raindrops fall to the earth. When you speak, you can only express what is in your mind at that moment. Once the words are spoken, they are no longer the same. They are in the past. But silence is not bound by time. It remains present, open to everything, without effort or judgment. Just like the sky above, silence holds everything within it. It does not need to change or control anything. It simply is. The traveler listened intently. He had never considered that silence could be so profound. He had always thought that silence meant emptiness. But now he realized that silence was not an absence of something, it was a presence, a space that embraced everything without needing to interfere. Silence was not an empty void. It was like the sky, vast and unchanging. Kaito paused for a moment as they walked through a quiet grove of trees. He looked up at the sky, his eyes soft, and then he continued, "You see, the sky does not judge the clouds that pass through it. The sky does not control how the clouds move. It simply holds them. It allows them to pass by. In the same way, silence does not judge the thoughts that come and go in the mind. It simply holds them. Silence does not resist the flow of life. It embraces it." The traveler's mind was beginning to open, and he felt the quiet wisdom in Kaito's words. He had spent so many years talking, analyzing, trying to explain everything around him. But now he understood that words could not contain everything. There were things beyond words, things that could only be felt in the silence, things that could not be captured by spoken language. Silence, Kaito said softly, is a way of accepting the present moment fully, without resistance. It is not about saying nothing, but about being fully present with what is. When you speak, you create a separation between yourself and the moment. But when you are silent, you merge with the moment. You become one with it. The traveler thought deeply. He realized that much of his life had been spent talking, explaining, and trying to make sense of everything. He had filled his life with words, hoping that they would bring clarity, but perhaps there was something more to life than words. Perhaps true understanding did not come from speaking, but from listening, from being present with the world as it was, without the need to label it or explain it. Kaito continued, "In silence, there is no need to explain or fix anything. The sky does not explain the clouds. It simply lets them pass. Similarly, Silence allows the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of life to pass through you without needing to change them. It is only when we fill our minds with words, with explanations, that we create barriers to true understanding. The traveler stopped walking, his mind now still. He had heard the truth in Kaito's words. He realized that much of his life had been spent creating barriers. Every time he spoke, every time he tried to explain or label something, he had been pushing away the fullness of the present moment. He had been focused on the need to understand everything, to make sense of everything. But in doing so, he had missed the beauty of simply being. "What can I do, Kaito, to learn this silence?" the traveler asked, his voice filled with genuine curiosity. Kaito smiled, a smile that was both kind and knowing. "The first step is to quiet the mind. When you find yourself filled with thoughts, allow them to come and go without attachment. Do not try to control them or hold on to them. Just let them pass, like clouds in the sky. When you can allow your thoughts to flow freely without judgment, you will begin to experience the peace that comes with silence." They sat down on a small bench beneath a tree, and Kaito looked out at the peaceful landscape. "Silence is not the absence of sound," he said. "It is the presence of stillness. It is the space in which all things arise and fade. In silence, there is no need for explanation or validation. There is simply acceptance." The traveler sat in silence beside Kaito, allowing the teachings to sink in. He felt the stillness in the air, the quiet that surrounded them, and he began to understand. Silence was not something that could be forced. It was not something that could be achieved by merely stopping speech. True silence came when the mind was at peace, when the heart was open to the present moment, without the need to label, explain, or understand. The traveler closed his eyes, letting the stillness of the moment wash over him. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of calm, a sense of presence that he had been searching for. He no longer needed to fill his mind with words. He could simply be, and in that being, he found peace. After a long moment, the traveler turned to Kaito and asked, "Master, does this mean I should speak less?" Kaito looked at him with a gentle smile. "No, my friend. It means that when you speak from a place of presence, from a place of peace. You will find that when your mind is still, your words will be few, but they will be clear. You will speak when it is necessary, and when you do, your words will carry more meaning because they come from a place of silence. Silence is not about saying nothing. It is about being fully present in the moment and allowing your words to flow naturally from that presence." The traveler nodded, a sense of clarity beginning to settle in his heart. He understood now that silence was not just the absence of sound, it was the presence of awareness, of being fully engaged with life as it was, without the need to manipulate or control it. It was a way of embracing the world without judgment, a way of accepting the flow of life without resistance. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the temple grounds, Kaito stood up, ready to return to his duties. The traveler stood with him, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Kaito," the traveler said. "Your words have brought me peace." Kaito smiled and nodded. "It is not my words that bring peace, but your own ability to listen to them in silence. May you find the stillness within, and may you live in that peace." As the traveler left the temple that evening, he felt a quiet transformation within himself. He had learned that silence was not something to be feared or avoided. It was a gift, a way to connect more deeply with the world. It was not about saying less, but about listening more and being fully present in each moment. And in that silence, he found the essence of life itself. In a quiet temple high in the mountains, there lived a monk named Satoshi. He was known throughout the land not for his words, but for his peaceful presence. Satoshi lived a simple life. His days were filled with the quiet rituals of the temple, meditation, sweeping the grounds, tending the garden, and sharing meals with the other monks. He rarely spoke of profound teachings or great wisdom, but those who spent time with him always felt a deep sense of peace. One day, a traveler arrived at the temple, weary from his long journey. He had heard stories of the monks and their wisdom, and he was eager to learn more. As he entered the temple, he was greeted warmly by the monks, and after some time, he found himself sitting across from Satoshi. The traveler noticed how still Satoshi was, how calm his presence seemed, and he couldn't help but be curious about the monk's practice. After a long silence, the traveler finally asked, "Monk, I have heard that you are a man of great wisdom. What is it that you practice? What teachings have you learned that I can carry with me on my journey?" Satoshi looked at the traveler with kind eyes, and after a pause, he smiled gently. "I have nothing to give but the present moment." The traveler laughed, thinking that the monk must be jesting. "Is that all? The present moment? How can that be enough? I've traveled far seeking wisdom. Surely you have more to offer than that." Satoshi's smile remained soft, and he did not seem offended by the traveler's laughter. "In accepting the present, I have everything," he said quietly. "The moment I release resistance, life flows to me effortlessly." The traveler was taken aback. He had expected a grand teaching, something that would change the course of his life, but instead, Satoshi offered a simple statement. How could this be the answer to his deep questions? The traveler's mind began to race with doubts. What does he mean by that, he wondered. Is the present moment truly enough? How could I live my life accepting only this moment? Seeing the traveler's confusion, Satoshi sat back and gestured for him to walk with him through the temple's garden. As they strolled along the path, Satoshi spoke again, his voice calm and measured. "Most of the time, we live our lives trying to control what happens next. We worry about the future, we regret the past, and we fill our minds with thoughts of what could have been or what might be. But the future has not come yet, and the past is gone. All we truly have is the present moment, and in this moment there is peace." The traveler listened carefully, but the idea of living fully in the present still felt strange to him. His mind was filled with worries about his journey ahead, his family, and the things he had left behind. How could he stop thinking about them? How could he focus only on the present when his life was so full of concerns? Satoshi seemed to sense the traveler's struggle and stopped walking. They stood beside a large tree, its branches heavy with the weight of the season's fruit. "Look at this tree," Satoshi said, pointing to its sturdy trunk and lush leaves. "The tree does not struggle to grow. It does not try to rush the process of bearing fruit. It simply grows, reaching towards the sunlight, and it accepts the seasons as they come. The tree is not caught up in the past or worried about the future. It simply lives in the present." The traveler gazed at the tree, noticing how it stood tall and strong. There was no rush, no force in its growth. It had its roots deep in the earth, and it simply existed. In that moment, the traveler realized that perhaps Satoshi was right. The tree did not resist the flow of life. It did not worry about what would come next. It simply accepted each moment as it was. Satoshi continued, "When we stop resisting life, when we stop struggling against the current of the present moment, we begin to flow with it. Life is like the river. It is always moving, always changing. When we try to hold on to the past or control the future, we are like a stone in the river, stuck and unmoving. But when we let go, when we accept the flow of life, we become like the water, effortless, at peace and alive." The traveler thought about this for a moment, and his mind slowly began to settle. He realized that much of his life had been spent resisting, trying to control outcomes, worrying about things that had already happened, or things that hadn't even come to pass. He had never thought about life in this way, that true peace came from accepting the present moment without judgment, without resistance. "I see now," the traveler said, his voice quiet. I have been trying so hard to control everything around me. I've been fighting the flow of life, struggling with what has passed and what is yet to come. But you're saying that if I let go, if I accept the present, life will become easier. Satoshi nodded, his eyes gentle. Yes, my friend. When you live in the present, you free yourself from the burdens of the past and the fears of the future. You are not weighed down by what has already happened or by what you think might happen. You simply live fully in this moment, and in doing so, you find peace. The traveler was silent for a long time, taking in what Satoshi had said. For the first time, he felt a sense of lightness in his heart. He had been carrying so much regret, worry, and the weight of trying to control everything. But now, he understood that peace did not come from effort or control. It came from surrender, from acceptance of what was. As they continued walking through the garden, the traveler asked, "But what about my journey? What about the things I must do? How do I move forward in life if I don't worry about the future?" Satoshi smiled. Living in the present moment does not mean you stop doing things or that you stop planning. It means that you approach each moment fully, without attachment to the outcome. You take each step as it comes, without anxiety or resistance. You do what you must, but you do it with ease, with peace, and without the weight of worry. The traveler nodded, beginning to understand. He realized that the more he tried to control the future, the more he resisted the present. It was as though he was constantly pushing against the current, trying to make it bend to his will, but in doing so, he had been exhausting himself. Now, he saw that peace came from simply stepping into the flow of life, accepting it as it was, and doing his best without attachment. "Thank you, Master Satoshi," the traveler said, his voice full of gratitude. "You have given me a new way to see my life. I will stop resisting and learn to live fully in the present. I see now that the future will unfold as it will, and I don't need to control it. I only need to accept each moment as it comes." Satoshi nodded and smiled. "You are beginning to understand. Life is not something to be controlled. It is something to be lived. When you accept the present moment, you are at peace with what is, and in that peace, life will unfold naturally. Remember, the moment you release resistance, life flows to you effortlessly." As the traveler left the temple, he felt lighter, more at ease than he had in a long time. The weight of worry, regret, and control had lifted from his shoulders. He walked down the path with a sense of calm, knowing that each step he took was enough. He no longer had to rush or force anything. He could simply be present, accept the flow of life, and move forward with peace in his heart. Years later, the traveler would often think back on that day with Master Satoshi. He would remember the simple yet profound lesson he had learned about living in the present. He would smile and say to others, "I learned from a wise monk that in accepting the present moment, we have everything. The moment we release our resistance, life flows to us effortlessly." And with that understanding, the traveler lived the rest of his days, no longer burdened by the need to control the future or dwell in the past. He embraced each moment fully, and in that acceptance, he found the peace he had been searching for all along. Keiko was a young student at a quiet Zen temple in the hills. She had come to the temple seeking peace, eager to learn the ways of meditation and to quiet her restless mind. She had heard stories of the stillness and serenity that came with meditation, and she longed to experience that same peace for herself. But despite her best efforts, Keiko found that the more she tried to meditate, the more her thoughts seemed to race. Each day, she sat in the meditation hall, her legs crossed and her hands resting in her lap. She focused on her breathing, trying to calm her mind. But no matter how hard she tried, her thoughts would not quiet. They came and went like the wind, fast and restless. She would think about the events of the day, the worries in her heart, and the things she had yet to accomplish. Each time a thought came, Keiko would try to push it away, but it only seemed to return stronger, filling her mind with noise. After days of frustration, Keiko finally approached her teacher, Master Zeno. Zeno was an old monk who had spent many years in quiet meditation. His presence was calm, and his movements were slow and deliberate. He had seen many students come and go, each with their own struggles, but he knew that the path to peace was not always an easy one. "Master," Keiko said, her voice filled with frustration, "I sit and sit, yet my thoughts do not quiet. I try to meditate, but it feels as if my mind is always racing. What am I doing wrong?" Zeno looked at Keiko with understanding. He had seen her struggle, but he knew that the answer was not in trying harder or forcing her mind to be still. The answer lay in a deeper understanding of meditation itself. He nodded slowly, his eyes calm. "Come with me," he said. "I will show you something." Keiko followed Zeno as he led her up the winding path that led to the top of a nearby mountain. The path was steep, and Keiko's legs grew tired, but she followed her master without question. The air grew cooler as they ascended, and the sound of the village faded into silence. Soon, they reached the summit, where Zeno stopped and gestured for Keiko to sit beside him. They sat in silence for a long time, looking out at the view before them. The valley stretched below, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and the sky was clear and vast. Keiko could feel the stillness of the mountain around her, the peace that seemed to radiate from the land itself. But still, her mind was restless, the same thoughts returning again and again. Finally, Zeno spoke. "Keiko, look at the mountain," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Do you see how it stands there, unmoving? It does not hurry, it does not try to change, it simply is." Keiko looked at the mountain. It was solid and unyielding, its peaks towering above the landscape. The mountain had been there for centuries, silent and still, weathering the winds and storms, yet always remaining the same. There was no hurry in its presence, no effort to change or become something else. The mountain simply stood, accepting whatever came. "Keiko," Zeno continued, "meditation is not about forcing your thoughts to stop. It is not about pushing them away. It is about being like the mountain, quiet, still, and accepting. When you sit to meditate, do not try to make your thoughts disappear. Simply let them come and go, without resistance. Like the mountain, you do not need to change anything. You simply need to be present, to allow the thoughts to arise and fade naturally." Keiko sat in silence, considering Zeno's words. She had always thought that meditation was about controlling her thoughts, about making her mind quiet. But now she understood that it was not about control, it was about acceptance. She had been fighting against her thoughts, trying to make them stop, but in doing so, she had only created more resistance. Zeno continued, "The mountain does not judge the clouds that pass by. It does not try to hold on to them or push them away. It simply allows them to move across the sky. Your thoughts are like those clouds. They come and they go. Some are light and fleeting, while others are dark and heavy. But just as the mountain allows the clouds to pass, you must allow your thoughts to pass as well. Do not hold on to them. Do not resist them. Just let them be." Keiko closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She tried to imagine herself like the mountain, still and unmovable. She could see the clouds in her mind, thoughts that came and went, some clear and light, others dark and heavy. She realized that each thought, no matter how persistent, was only temporary. It would pass, just like the clouds in the sky. And in the meantime, she did not need to chase it or fight it. "Master, how do I stop myself from getting caught in my thoughts?" Keiko asked quietly, her mind still restless. Zeno smiled softly. "You do not stop the thoughts from coming, Keiko. You simply stop giving them your attention. When a cloud passes across the sky, the mountain does not chase it. It does not cling to it. It simply remains as it is. And in time, the cloud will pass. In the same way, when a thought arises, do not give it your full attention. Acknowledge it, and then let it go. Do not hold on to it. Do not follow it. Keiko nodded, beginning to understand. It was not about making the thoughts go away. It was about not letting them control her. When a thought arose, she could simply acknowledge it without becoming attached. She did not need to engage with it. She could let it pass, just as the mountain allowed the clouds to drift by. Zeno continued, "The more you resist something, the more power you give it. The mountain does not resist the clouds, and so they do not disturb it. But when you fight against your thoughts, you give them strength. You allow them to fill your mind. The key is to let go, to stop resisting. When you accept the thoughts without attachment, they lose their power over you." Keiko sat still, reflecting on what Zeno had said. She realized that she had been fighting her thoughts for so long, trying to control them, trying to make them go away. But in doing so, she had only made them stronger. Now, she understood that true peace came from letting go, from accepting the thoughts without attachment. "Master," Keiko said after a long pause, "so I should simply sit, without resistance, and let my thoughts come and go?" Zeno nodded. "Yes, Keiko. Let the thoughts come and go, just as the clouds pass through the sky. Do not hold on to them. Do not try to change them. Simply let them pass, and remain as still as the mountain." Keiko took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm begin to settle within her. She no longer needed to fight her thoughts. She could simply sit, allowing each thought to come and go, just as the clouds moved across the sky. The weight of her frustration began to lift, and she felt the stillness of the mountain within herself. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the mountains, Keiko felt a deep sense of peace. She had been searching for quiet in her mind, but now she understood that peace was not about forcing the mind to be still. Peace was about acceptance, about allowing each moment to unfold without resistance. Zeno stood up, and Keiko followed him back down the mountain path. As they walked, Keiko felt lighter, her heart free from the burden of trying to control her thoughts. She had learned that meditation was not a struggle, but a way of being. It was about accepting the present moment, without judgment, without resistance. Just as the mountain stood still and accepted the clouds, she could sit quietly and accept her thoughts. When they reached the temple, Zeno turned to Keiko and smiled. "You are beginning to understand. Meditation is not about making the mind quiet. It is about letting the mind be as it is, without attachment. When you meditate like the mountain, you will find peace." Keiko smiled back, her heart at ease. She had learned the true essence of meditation, and she felt ready to embrace it fully. She understood now that she did not need to struggle or fight her thoughts. She only needed to let them pass and remain as still as the mountain. And from that day forward, Keiko practiced meditation with a new sense of peace. Each time a thought arose, she allowed it to come and go, without attachment. She no longer struggled, but simply sat, like the mountain, accepting the present moment as it was. And in that acceptance, she found the peace she had been seeking all along. Toshi, a Zen teacher, had lived in a small temple at the edge of a dense forest for many years. The temple was quiet and peaceful, surrounded by tall trees and the sounds of nature. Toshi's days were spent teaching the monks, guiding them in meditation, and caring for the temple grounds. His teachings were simple yet profound. He often spoke of the importance of accepting life as it is, without resistance. One morning, as the sun began to rise and the air was still cool, Toshi went for a walk in the forest. The trees were bathed in the soft light of dawn, their leaves shimmering as the wind gently stirred them. Toshi walked along the familiar path that led to a large tree in the center of the forest. This tree was known for its sweet fruit, which hung from its branches in abundance during the summer months. The fruit was ripe and ready to be picked, but Toshi had always found it to be an interesting sight, watching the animals around the tree. As he approached, he saw a monkey leaping from branch to branch, reaching for the fruit. The monkey jumped high, its small hands stretching toward the ripe fruit, but each time it got close, the fruit seemed to move just out of reach. The monkey would try again, leaping and stretching, but it could not seem to grasp the fruit. Its efforts grew more frantic, but no matter how much it tried, it was unable to reach the fruit. Toshi watched the monkey with a calm expression, understanding that this was not simply a playful sight, it was a lesson in itself. He observed the monkey's persistence, but also its frustration. The more it tried, the more it seemed to struggle. The monkey was so focused on reaching the fruit that it did not see the simple truth. The fruit was already ripe, already hanging, and all that was needed was acceptance, not effort. After some time, Toshi called out gently, "Monkey, the fruit is already ripe and hanging. Your effort to grasp it only keeps it further away. Acceptance of what is already given allows the fruit to fall into your hand." The monkey paused, as though it had heard the voice of the teacher, but it didn't stop jumping. Toshi smiled softly and continued to watch. The lesson was not for the monkey, it was for him. The monkey was struggling against the flow of nature, trying to make something happen that was already inevitable. The fruit would fall when the time was right, but the monkey's insistence on grasping it only kept it further away. Toshi walked closer to the tree, still watching the monkey. His eyes remained soft, his heart steady. "The more you try, the further the fruit moves from your grasp," he said again. "Your effort is not the way. Relax and let the fruit come to you." The monkey, still not understanding, jumped again, and again it missed the fruit. It was caught in a cycle, not seeing that its persistence was what was keeping it from reaching the very thing it desired. Toshi continued his walk beneath the branches of the tree, his mind calm. He understood the lesson that was unfolding before him. The monkey's struggle mirrored the way many people lived their lives. They chased after things, constantly striving, grasping, and reaching, not realizing that the things they sought were already within reach. Like the ripe fruit, everything was already there, already ready to fall into their hands. But they were so caught up in their efforts, in their striving, that they could not see the simplicity of what was before them. Toshi stopped and sat down beneath the tree, watching the monkey one last time. He waited patiently, knowing that the fruit would not fall while the monkey was so focused on its attempts. The fruit would fall when the monkey relaxed, when it stopped forcing its will upon nature and accepted the moment as it was. Minutes passed, and the monkey, now out of breath and tired from its jumping, stopped and sat quietly beneath the tree. For the first time, it relaxed and let go of its frantic efforts. It simply sat, observing the fruit above, and then, as if on cue, the ripe fruit fell from the branch and landed gently in the monkey's hands. Toshi smiled softly. He had known that this would happen. The monkey had learned, in its own way, that forcing and striving were not the way to obtain what it sought. When it stopped fighting and simply accepted the moment, the fruit fell effortlessly into its hands. As the monkey sat beneath the tree, holding the fruit, Toshi spoke again, but this time his words were directed to the traveler who had been watching from a distance. The traveler had witnessed the entire scene, the monkey's struggle, Toshi's calm words, and the moment when the fruit finally fell. "You see," Toshi said to the traveler, "the fruit was always ready. It was always hanging there, waiting. The monkey's effort to grasp it only created resistance. When it stopped fighting, when it stopped forcing, the fruit fell naturally. So too is life. When we stop struggling against it, When we let go of our attachment to outcomes, life flows to us effortlessly. The traveler stood still, processing Toshi's words. He had seen the truth in the lesson, and it was clear to him now. He had spent much of his life striving for success, always chasing after goals and desires, believing that happiness and fulfillment were something to be grasped, something to be earned. But now, after watching the monkey, he saw the wisdom in Toshi's words. Sometimes, the more we try, the further we move away from what we seek. Only by accepting life as it is, by letting go of resistance, could the things we desired come to us. Toshi stood up and walked toward the traveler. "Do not waste your energy chasing after things that are already yours," he said. "Just as the fruit is already ripe and waiting to fall, so too is peace, happiness, and contentment. They are not distant goals to be pursued, they are already here. The only thing that keeps them from you is your own resistance." The traveler nodded, the weight of the lesson settling deeply within him. He had spent many years seeking answers, running from one goal to the next, only to feel more restless and unfulfilled. But now he understood that true peace did not come from struggle or effort. It came from acceptance, from letting go, and from being present in the moment. As the traveler walked back toward the temple with Toshi, he felt lighter. His mind, once filled with a constant stream of thoughts and desires, was quiet now. He understood that the fruit was always within reach, that he did not need to struggle to obtain it. All he needed to do was stop fighting and accept life as it was. In that acceptance, everything would fall into place. The next day, the traveler left the temple, carrying with him the wisdom he had learned from Toshi and the monkey. He no longer sought peace or happiness as distant goals to be achieved. He had learned that they were already here, already available, if only he would stop striving for them. Years later, when the traveler would share his story, he would smile and say, "I learned from a wise teacher that the fruit is always ripe, but only when we stop reaching for it does it fall into our hands." And in this way, Toshi's lesson lived on, teaching others that life's most valuable gifts, peace, happiness, contentment, are not things to be grasped, but things to be received with open hands, when we let go and allow them to flow to us effortlessly. Just like the fruit, they are always there, waiting for us to stop struggling and accept what is already given. Hiro, a young traveler, had been journeying through the mountains for several days. He had heard stories about the wisdom of the monks living at the temples scattered across the peaks, and he had come to seek answers for the restlessness that seemed to follow him everywhere he went. Despite his many travels and his wide experience, Hiro felt lost, uncertain about his direction in life. His thoughts were a constant whirlwind, and no matter how far he walked, the quiet he sought seemed always just out of reach. One afternoon, as Hiro wandered through a valley surrounded by tall cliffs, he came upon a monastery built near the base of a majestic waterfall. The sound of the water rushing over the rocks was loud and calming, a force of nature that seemed to fill the air with both power and peace. Hiro approached the waterfall with awe. The water cascaded down with a relentless energy, never stopping, always flowing. It was beautiful and immense. The roar of the waterfall was both humbling and thrilling, a symbol of nature's might. He stood there, watching for some time, captivated by the endless flow. The water seemed to have no end, no beginning, just a constant cycle of movement. He marveled at how the waterfall flowed so effortlessly, without pause, never seeming to struggle. It moved, it fell, it splashed, and yet it never hesitated. Hiro's attention was soon drawn away from the waterfall when he noticed a monk standing beside him, looking at the waterfall as well. The monk had a calm, peaceful presence. His robe swayed gently in the breeze, and his eyes were fixed on the water. Hiro, feeling the stirrings of a question in his heart, approached the monk. "Master," Hiro said, This waterfall is so powerful and beautiful. How does it flow so endlessly, so effortlessly? How does it keep going without ever stopping? The monk turned to look at Hero with kind eyes, his face soft with wisdom. He had been waiting for this question, knowing that the waterfall was not just a natural wonder, but a deep lesson for those who were willing to listen. The monk smiled and said, "The waterfall never struggles. It simply follows the course of the land. It flows because it accepts the path ahead, the path it is meant to follow. The water does not resist its journey. It surrenders to the course the land has set for it. To flow like the waterfall, one must accept each moment and surrender to the path ahead." Hero was silent for a moment, reflecting on the monk's words. He had never thought of water in such a way. The idea that the waterfall did not struggle against the land, that it simply flowed with the terrain, seemed so simple, yet so profound. Hero's mind, filled with the constant need to control, to shape his own future, began to quiet as he listened to the monk's words. "But Master," Hero asked, still unsure, "how can I accept the path ahead? I've been trying so hard to control my journey, to make sure that I'm going in the right direction. How do I let go of my need to control things?" The monk's smile deepened, and he gestured toward the waterfall. The water does not ask the land where it should go. It does not try to force its way forward or resist the obstacles in its path. The water flows with the land, and when it encounters rocks, it simply moves around them. It does not resist, and in its acceptance, it continues forward. You, too, must learn to let go of resistance. When you stop fighting against the flow of life, when you accept each moment as it comes, life will carry you just as the water is carried. Hero stood quietly, listening. The monk's words felt like a gentle breeze that cleared away the heavy thoughts in his mind. He had spent his life trying to control his path, always pushing forward, always looking for the next step, but never truly accepting the present. Now, the monk was showing him that peace and wisdom came not from control, but from surrender. Like the water, Hero could flow with life instead of fighting it. The monk continued, "Life is like the course of a river. You cannot control the direction of the water. You cannot make the water go faster or slower. You can only move with it, and in that movement, you find your path. The waterfall flows because it accepts the shape of the land. It doesn't worry about where it's going or when it will end. It simply flows, trusting that each moment brings it to the next." Hero thought deeply about this. His mind often raced, full of worries about the future and regrets about the past. He had spent so much time resisting what was happening, trying to push life in a direction that felt right to him, but it never seemed to work. His efforts to control things only made him more tired, more uncertain. What if he could simply flow with life, like the water, trusting that it would take him to where he needed to go? The monk noticed Hero's quiet reflection and said, "To flow with life, you must trust that the path you are on is the right one for you. You do not need to force anything. When you stop fighting and accept the moment you are in, you will find that life moves naturally and everything falls into place." Hero's heart began to feel lighter. He realized that his struggle to control his journey had been the source of much of his frustration. Perhaps, instead of fighting against life, he could surrender to it, accepting what came and flowing with it. It was not about forcing things to happen, but about trusting in the path ahead. As they stood together, Hero looked at the waterfall again. He could see now that the water was not fighting against the rocks. It was not struggling to reach the bottom. It was simply following its path, moving with the land, accepting whatever came along the way. The water didn't try to change the rocks, and the rocks didn't try to stop the water. They existed together in harmony, each accepting the other's place in the world. "I understand now," Hero said, his voice soft with realization. "I've been trying to force my life to go the way I want, But I see now that life is like this water. If I can accept the present and let go of the need to control everything, I will flow with life, just as the water flows with the land." The monk nodded, his eyes filled with warmth. "Yes, hero. When you flow with life, you will find peace. Life will take you where you need to go, but only if you stop fighting against it. Like the waterfall, you must surrender to the path ahead, trusting that it will lead you to where you are meant to be." Hero stood in silence for a long time, taking in the wisdom of the monk's words. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of calm, a sense of clarity. He did not need to force his life to be something it wasn't. He did not need to control every outcome. He could simply let go, accept each moment as it came, and trust that life would guide him. As the day began to fade into evening, the monk and hero sat together by the waterfall, listening to the sound of the water rushing over the rocks. The sky above them was painted with soft hues of orange and pink as the sun set behind the mountains. The peacefulness of the scene filled Hero's heart, and he realized that, like the waterfall, he could trust the flow of his life. He could let go of his struggle and accept each moment as it came. The monk turned to Hero and said, "Remember, Hero, the waterfall does not ask where it is going. It simply flows. You too must trust that each moment is leading you where you need to go. When you stop resisting, when you accept the path ahead, you will find peace in the flow of life." Hero bowed to the monk, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had come seeking wisdom, but he had found something even more valuable: the understanding that peace does not come from control or resistance. It comes from acceptance, from surrendering to the flow of life. Like the waterfall, he could trust that everything was already unfolding as it should. With a heart full of peace, Hero left the waterfall that evening, knowing that he had learned one of life's most important lessons. He did not need to struggle. He did not need to control. All he needed to do was flow with life, just as the waterfall flowed with the land. And as he continued his journey, Hero moved through life with a new sense of ease, trusting that every step he took was part of the flow, part of the path that was already unfolding before him. Just as the waterfall never hurried or resisted, Hero would live his life with acceptance, trusting that each moment would carry him to where he was meant to be. Rio was a young monk who had spent many years at the temple high in the mountain. His life was simple, filled with the tasks of meditation, sweeping the garden, and studying the Zen teachings. Despite his dedication, Rio often felt a restlessness within him. He had been taught many lessons, but something still eluded him. He felt as though there was something more to life, something beyond the routine of his days, something he needed to understand. One afternoon, after completing his morning chores, Rio went to the temple garden to find some quiet. The garden was small but beautifully tended. There were stones placed carefully in the ground, bamboo arranged thoughtfully along the pathways, and a variety of flowers that bloomed in the spring and summer months. Rio sat down on the edge of the garden, his legs crossed, and watched the flowers gently sway in the breeze. He watched one particular flower, a delicate blossom that was slowly opening. The petals unfurled, revealing their soft pink color, and Rio found himself mesmerized by the flower's slow transformation. The flower seemed to be reaching toward the sun, its petals gradually spreading open, like a hand offering itself to the light. After a while, Rio couldn't help but wonder, how does the flower know when to open? He had been thinking about this for some time. The flower did not seem to rush, nor did it seem to be waiting for something. It simply opened at its own pace, as though it knew exactly when the time was right. But how? How did it know when to bloom? And why was it so effortless? Feeling a sense of curiosity, Rio went to find his master, Zenji, who had been sitting under the large tree near the temple. Zenji was a quiet, wise man, known for his deep understanding of life's mysteries. He had been Ryo's teacher for many years, and it was to Zenji that Ryo turned when he had questions about life and the world around him. "Master," Ryo said, bowing respectfully before Zenji, "I was sitting in the garden, watching a flower bloom. I wonder, how does the flower know when to open? How does it know when it is the right time?" Zenji looked up from the book he had been reading, his eyes calm and full of quiet wisdom. He smiled gently and gestured for Ryo to sit beside him. "Ryo," Zenji said slowly, "the flower does not know. It simply accepts the warmth of the sun and the touch of the wind. It does not force itself to bloom. It simply allows. This is the way of acceptance." Ryo was silent for a moment, pondering his master's words. "But master, why doesn't the flower struggle like I do? It doesn't seem to be trying to force anything, it just opens. How does it know what to do?" Zenji smiled again, and his eyes sparkled with a kind of knowing that Ryo had come to admire over the years. "The flower does not struggle because it knows that it does not need to. It simply follows the rhythm of nature. It grows with the light, it responds to the warmth, and when the time is right, it opens. It does not fight against the sun or the wind. It accepts what is given. And in that acceptance, it becomes exactly what it is meant to be. The flower knows not by thinking, but by being." Ryo listened closely, trying to understand the depth of his master's words. He had spent so much of his life trying to control everything around him. He had tried to force himself to be better, to make progress, to grow faster in his practice. He often found himself struggling, trying to understand everything all at once, but somehow feeling frustrated when things didn't change quickly enough. "Master," Ryo said, his voice filled with wonder, "are you saying that I do not need to struggle or force myself to grow, that I should simply accept what is happening around me, just as the flower accepts the warmth of the sun?" Zenji nodded slowly. "Yes, Ryo. Like the flower, you must learn to accept the flow of life. The flower does not force itself to bloom, it simply allows itself to open when the time is right. You, too, must stop struggling against the moments of your life. When you stop forcing things to happen, you will find that they unfold naturally. Acceptance is the key to peace." Ryo thought about this for a long time. He had always believed that growth came through effort, through pushing himself harder and harder. He had been taught that the path to enlightenment was one of constant striving, constant improvement. But now, he saw that the flower's wisdom was different. The flower did not try to be something it was not. It did not rush its growth or wait impatiently for the moment to come. It simply existed in harmony with what was around it, trusting that it would bloom when it was time. Ryo felt a shift inside him, a quiet understanding growing in his heart. He realized that the more he struggled to achieve, the more he resisted the natural flow of life. He had been fighting against his own pace, trying to make things happen on his own timeline, without understanding that each moment had its own rhythm. Just like the flower, he needed to accept the flow of life and trust that everything would unfold in its own time. Zenji continued, "When you learn to accept the present moment, when you stop forcing things, you will begin to flow with life. You will not feel the need to push or struggle. You will simply be, and in that being, you will find peace. Just as the flower does not try to rush its opening, so too must you learn to live in the present without resistance." Ryo nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. For the first time, he understood what Zenji had been teaching him all these years. It was not about striving harder or pushing through difficulties. It was about being present in the moment, accepting life as it came, and trusting that, in time, he would become exactly what he was meant to be. As they sat in silence, watching the gentle breeze move through the trees, Ryo felt a deep sense of calm wash over him. He realized that in trying to force his growth, he had been resisting the very thing he sought. Peace and wisdom did not come from effort, but from acceptance. The flower had shown him this truth. The flower did not struggle, and in its acceptance of what was, it bloomed effortlessly. "Master," Rio said quietly, "I see now. The flower does not struggle because it knows that its time will come. I too must stop struggling and simply accept the moments as they come." Zenji nodded, his face soft with approval. "Exactly, Rio. Life is like the journey of the flower. It does not rush to become something else. It accepts the warmth of the sun and the touch of the wind, and when the time is right, it blooms. So too must you accept the path you are on, without rushing or forcing things. When you do, you will find that you grow naturally, and in that growth you will find peace." As Rio stood to leave, he felt a quiet strength in his heart. The lesson of the flower had become clear to him. He no longer needed to force his growth, no longer needed to strive endlessly for something he thought was missing. He could trust the path ahead and surrender to the flow of life. In the days that followed, Rio approached his meditation practice with new eyes. He did not try to quiet his mind by force. Instead, he sat quietly, letting his thoughts come and go without resistance, just as the flower accepted the warmth of the sun and the touch of the wind. And in time, his mind began to quiet, not through effort, but through acceptance. The flowers in the garden bloomed with the changing seasons, and Rio's heart bloomed too. He learned that just like the flower, he did not need to rush, did not need to force anything. All he needed to do was accept the present moment, let go of resistance, and trust that life would unfold in its own time. And in that trust, he found the peace he had been seeking. Haruto was a young monk new to the temple, still learning the ways of simplicity and stillness. The temple stood on a quiet hill, surrounded by tall trees and the sounds of nature. Haruto spent his days sweeping the grounds, working in the garden, and meditating. The tasks were simple, yet each one seemed to hold a lesson in patience and presence. One afternoon, as Haruto was sweeping the courtyard, he noticed something glinting in the sunlight. At first, he thought it was a stone, but as he approached, he realized it was a broken mirror. It was cracked in several places, and the sharp pieces of glass caught the light, reflecting the world in fragmented patterns. Haruto picked it up carefully, wondering if it could be repaired. He had been taught that everything in life could be fixed if one put enough effort into it, and surely a broken mirror was no exception. He went to find his master, Yuko, who was known throughout the temple for his wisdom. Master Yuko had lived a long life, and his presence always seemed calm, like a steady stream of water. He had a way of seeing beyond the surface of things, always aware of the deeper truths that lay hidden beneath. Haruto found Master Yuko sitting under a tree in the temple garden, lost in quiet meditation. He approached and respectfully bowed. "Master, I found this broken mirror while I was sweeping the courtyard," Haruto said, holding the shattered mirror out in front of him. "I was wondering if it could be repaired. It seems so beautiful, but it is cracked. Can it be fixed?" Yuko opened his eyes slowly, his gaze soft but clear. He took the mirror from Haruto's hands and examined it quietly. He did not speak for some time, his eyes tracing the cracks in the glass, as if he was seeing something deeper than just a broken reflection. Finally, he spoke, his voice gentle and calm. "A broken mirror reflects no less of the truth," Yuko said. "It shows us that nothing is permanent, and in accepting its imperfection, we come closer to understanding the true nature of things." Haruto looked at his master, confused. "But master," he said, "it is broken. Doesn't it lose its ability to reflect clearly? How can it show the truth if it is shattered?" Yuko smiled softly and gestured for Haruto to sit beside him. "The mirror may be broken, but the truth it reflects remains the same. The reflection of the world, the trees, the sky, and even yourself, is still present in the broken pieces. In fact, sometimes it is in the imperfection of things that we see their true nature. Just as the mirror cannot be whole anymore, so too is life full of change and impermanence. Everything is constantly changing, constantly moving. When we accept the imperfection in things, we learn to see life as it truly is. Haruto sat in silence, considering his master's words. He had been focused on the idea of fixing things, of making them whole again, but Yuko's words pointed to something deeper. Perhaps the mirror didn't need to be fixed at all. Perhaps its brokenness was a reflection of the world itself, imperfect, yet still full of beauty and truth. Yuko continued, "In trying to fix everything, we miss the lesson that imperfection has to offer. We spend so much time wanting things to be perfect, wanting them to fit into a certain idea of what they should be, that we fail to see their true value. This broken mirror, like everything in life, is impermanent. It does not need to be perfect to reflect the truth. In its brokenness, it is a reminder that nothing in this world is permanent. Everything changes, everything breaks down, and in that, there is beauty." Haruto looked at the mirror again, noticing the way the shards reflected the light in different angles, casting small patterns across the ground. He could see the trees, the sky, and even himself in the fragments. It was not a perfect reflection, but it was still true. "Master," Haruto said after a long pause, "does this mean that we should stop trying to fix things? That we should accept everything as it is?" Yuko's eyes were kind, but there was a depth to them, as though he had seen much of life's impermanence and understood it fully. "We do not stop caring for things, Haruto, but we must learn to accept them as they are, without attachment to how we think they should be. The act of fixing or improving is not wrong, but it must come from a place of understanding, not of resistance. When we try to fix something simply because we cannot accept its imperfection, we miss the lesson it offers us. The broken mirror teaches us that there is beauty in imperfection. It is not about creating something perfect, but about understanding that everything, even in its brokenness, is part of the whole." Haruto thought about this. He had spent much of his life striving for perfection, believing that only when things were whole and complete could they be truly valuable. But now, in his master's quiet words, he began to see that imperfection was not a flaw, it was simply a part of life, a part of the natural order of things. The mirror, in its broken state, was still valuable. It still reflected the world, still showed the truth, even though it was not whole. Master Yuko continued, "The broken mirror is a symbol of life itself. We are all like this mirror, broken in some way, imperfect in some way. We try to make ourselves whole, to fix the broken parts of ourselves, but in doing so, we often ignore the beauty in our imperfection. The mirror reflects the world, not perfectly, but truthfully. When we accept our imperfections, we are able to see the world as it is, and we find peace in that acceptance." Haruto sat quietly, feeling a shift within himself. He had spent so much time trying to be perfect, trying to fix the parts of himself that felt broken or incomplete. But now he understood that his imperfections were not something to be ashamed of or to fix at all. They were part of the truth, part of the beauty of life. Just as the mirror still reflected the world, despite its cracks, so too could he reflect the world, even with his own flaws. He looked at the broken mirror again, this time seeing it not as something damaged, but as something whole in its own way. The cracks, the imperfections, the way the light scattered across the ground, all of it was part of the mirror's truth. And in that truth, there was beauty. "Thank you, Master," Haruto said softly. "I see now. The mirror does not need to be fixed. It reflects the truth just as it is, and so do we." Yuko smiled, pleased with his student's understanding. "Yes, Haruto. When we stop fighting our imperfections, when we stop trying to make ourselves perfect, we begin to see the truth of who we are. The truth is not found in perfection, it is found in acceptance. Accept yourself as you are, and you will see the world with clarity. Just as the broken mirror reflects the world without judgment, so too can we reflect the world in its purest form when we accept ourselves without judgment. Haruto felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. He had spent so much time struggling to be someone he thought he should be, someone without flaws or mistakes. But now he realized that his flaws were not something to hide, they were part of who he was. And in accepting them, he could see the truth of himself more clearly. As Haruto returned to the temple that evening, he carried the lesson of the broken mirror with him. He understood now that life was full of imperfections, and that there was beauty in those imperfections. The world did not need to be perfect to be full of truth, and neither did he. He could now embrace his own brokenness, knowing that in doing so, he would come closer to understanding the true nature of things. Years later, when Haruto became a teacher himself, he would often tell his students the story of the broken mirror. He would tell them that the mirror reflected no less truth because it was broken. He would teach them that acceptance of imperfection was not a weakness, but a strength. And he would remind them that, like the mirror, we are all part of the truth, even in our brokenness. When we accept ourselves fully, we begin to see the world as it is, and in that clarity, we find peace. The lesson of the broken mirror stayed with Haruto for the rest of his life. In the cracks, in the flaws, in the moments of imperfection, he found truth, and he found peace. A long time ago, in a small temple tucked away in the mountains, there lived a wise monk named Zenji. The temple was surrounded by trees, their branches swaying in the gentle wind. The monks there spent their days in quiet reflection, meditation, and simple tasks. Zenji had taught many students over the years, and they often found his words to be deep, though he rarely spoke much. His wisdom was found more in his actions and in the peaceful way he carried himself. One day, a traveler arrived at the temple. He had walked long distances, seeking peace for his troubled mind. His heart was heavy with worries, and his soul restless. He had traveled far and wide, always seeking something that would bring him true peace. But it seemed that no matter where he went, the peace he sought remained elusive. When the traveler entered the temple, he was greeted warmly by the monks. They invited him to stay, offering him food and shelter for the night. After they had shared a simple meal together, the traveler sat with Zenji. He had heard of Zenji's reputation as a wise and peaceful monk, and he hoped that Zenji could help him find the peace he had been seeking. "Master Zenji," the traveler said, "I have been on a long journey in search of peace. I've walked many paths, asked many questions, and sought advice from many teachers. But still, peace seems to slip through my fingers. I feel lost and unsure of which path to take. Can you tell me, which path should I follow to find peace?" Zenji looked at the traveler with gentle eyes, his expression calm. He had heard many questions like this over the years. People were often searching for peace, but they rarely knew that peace was not something to be found by searching for it outside themselves. Zenji knew that the traveler, like many others, was looking in the wrong place. After a moment of silence, Zenji spoke softly. "There are many paths in life, my friend. Some are long and winding, others are short and straight. Some paths are smooth, while others are rough and difficult. But peace is not found by following a specific path. It is found when you cease seeking it. The path and the traveler are one. Accept the path you are on, and peace will arise naturally." The traveler was silent for a moment, his mind trying to grasp the meaning of Zenji's words. "But Master, how can I find peace if I stop seeking it? How can I know I'm on the right path if I don't actively look for peace?" Zenji smiled, his eyes soft with understanding. "You see, the trouble with seeking peace is that it is always ahead of you, just out of reach. The more you chase it, the further away it becomes. Peace is not something you can chase or force to happen. It is already here, right now. But it is only when you stop searching for it outside of yourself that you can truly experience it. When you stop running, you realize that peace has always been with you, waiting for you to accept it. The traveler sat quietly, unsure of what to say. He had always believed that peace was something to be obtained, something to be found through effort and striving. But now, Zenji's words were challenging everything he had thought. Could it be that peace was not something to be gained, but something to be accepted? Zenji continued. Imagine you are walking down a path. You look ahead, searching for something, in the distance, always trying to reach it. But while you are looking ahead, you miss the beauty of the path beneath your feet. You miss the trees, the flowers, the breeze, and the sounds of nature all around you. The path is not just the destination, it is the journey. When you stop focusing on where you are going, you begin to appreciate where you are. The traveler looked down at his feet. He realized that he had been so focused on the idea of peace that he had failed to notice the small moments of peace that were already present. He had been so focused on the future, on the idea of finding peace in some far-off place, that he had missed the peace that was already in the present moment. Zenji continued, "The path is not separate from you. It is not something you walk toward. It is part of you, just as you are part of it. When you accept the path you are on, without resistance, you begin to find peace in each step. Peace is not a distant goal. It is found in the present moment, in the simple act of being where you are. When you stop searching for it, it will come to you naturally." The traveler felt a shift in his heart. For the first time, he understood that peace was not something to be obtained. It was something to be accepted. He had been searching for peace in all the wrong places, chasing after it, forcing it, striving for it. But now, he saw that peace was not something outside of him. It was already within him, always present, waiting for him to stop seeking it. "But Master," the traveler said softly, "how can I stop seeking peace? I have been searching for so long, and I don't know how to let go of that search." Zenji smiled gently, his voice calm. "The search for peace is like trying to hold water in your hands. The more you grasp, the more it slips away. Let go of your need to control the path. Let go of the desire to find something that is already within you. Simply walk the path with acceptance. Walk it with gratitude for the steps you take, not for where they might lead. Peace comes in the letting go." The traveler closed his eyes for a moment, letting Zenji's words sink in. He thought about all the times he had tried to control his life, all the moments when he had struggled to find peace. He had been like a traveler, constantly looking for the next place, the next goal, believing that peace was always just ahead. But now he saw that peace was not a destination, it was in the journey itself. The traveler turned to Zenji, his eyes filled with understanding. "So, you are saying that peace is found in accepting the journey, in accepting the path I am on right now, without trying to change it or make it something else?" Zenji nodded, his smile warm. "Yes, my friend. The path and the traveler are one. When you stop fighting the path, when you stop seeking something outside of yourself, peace will naturally arise. It is only when you stop seeking peace that you will truly find it." The traveler felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. He had been searching for so long, thinking that peace was something he had to find. But now he understood that peace was not something outside of him, it was within, waiting for him to stop seeking and simply accept the path he was on. As the day turned into evening, the traveler sat with Zenji, reflecting on the teachings he had received. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the temple and the path that lay before him. He felt lighter, freer, and for the first time in many years, at peace. The next morning, the traveler prepared to continue his journey. He stood at the edge of the temple, looking down the path that stretched ahead of him. He did not know what the future held, but for the first time, he did not feel the need to control it. He accepted the path he was on, knowing that peace would come not from where he was going, but from how he walked the path. As he walked away from the temple, the traveler felt a sense of calm that he had never experienced before. He walked not with the goal of reaching something, but simply to walk. He took each step with acceptance, with gratitude for the present moment. The path before him was no longer a place to reach, but a place to be. And in that being, he found peace. Years later, when others came to him seeking wisdom, the traveler would smile and share the lesson he had learned from Zenji. There are many paths, he would say, but peace is found when you cease seeking it. The path and the traveler are one. Accept the path you are on, and peace will arise naturally. And in that acceptance, the traveler found a peace that stayed with him always. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in soft hues of pink and orange, Yumi, a young student of Zen, sat beside a still pond. The air was cool, and the peaceful sound of water lapping at the shore filled the silence. The pond was perfectly calm, its surface like a smooth mirror, reflecting the sky above. As Yumi sat there, she looked up at the rising moon, glowing brightly against the darkening sky. The moon's reflection shimmered on the surface of the pond, creating a soft, glowing image that seemed to dance gently with the ripples in the water. Yumi was captivated by the beauty of the scene. The moon, so distant and untouchable, yet so clear and present in the water before her. She wondered how she could hold on to that beauty, how she could make the moon stay with her. After a long moment of watching, Yumi turned to her master, who was sitting beside her in quiet contemplation. Master Zenji, an elderly monk with a calm demeanor, had been her teacher for many years. His wisdom was simple but profound, and Yumi had learned much from him. She looked to him now, seeking understanding. "Master," she asked softly, "how can I hold on to the beauty of the moon? It is so beautiful, and yet it feels so fleeting. The reflection in the water will soon fade. How can I make it last?" Master Zenji did not answer right away. He sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the moon and its reflection in the water. The night was peaceful, and the world around them seemed to pause in quiet stillness. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. "You cannot hold the moon," he said gently, his voice steady, "but you can embrace the stillness of the pond. When the mind is still, beauty arises, just as the moon is reflected in a calm pond." Yumi looked at him, puzzled. She had not quite understood what he meant. "Master, what do you mean?" "How can I embrace the stillness of the pond? The moon is so beautiful, but it is so far away. How can I hold on to that beauty?" Master Zenji smiled softly, his eyes kind and filled with understanding. "The moon is always there, Yumi, just as beauty is always present. But if the water in the pond is disturbed, the reflection becomes unclear. It is only when the water is still that the moon's image is reflected clearly. In the same way, when your mind is still, you can see the beauty of life clearly. The beauty is always there, just as the moon is always in the sky. But if your mind is filled with thoughts and distractions, you cannot see it. It is only when the mind is calm and still that beauty arises naturally." Yumi sat in silence, trying to understand what her master was teaching her. She had always believed that beauty was something to be captured, something to be held onto. She had thought that if she could just hold the moon in her hands, she could keep that beauty forever. But now, Master Zenji was showing her something different. He was teaching her that beauty could not be captured or held. It was something that arose naturally when the mind was still, like the reflection of the moon on a calm pond. Master Zenji continued, "The moon does not need to be held. It is already present. It is the reflection of the moon that you see in the pond. But the reflection only appears when the water is still. When your mind is still, you can see the beauty of the world around you." You can experience the peace and wonder that is always there, but it is hidden behind the turbulence of your thoughts. Yumi thought about this for a moment. She had often struggled with her thoughts, with the constant noise in her mind. She had tried so hard to make her thoughts go away, but they always seemed to return, always filling her mind with distractions. She had never thought about her thoughts in this way, that they were like the ripples in the pond, obscuring the beauty that was already present. "Master," Yumi said slowly, "how can I make my mind still? I try to quiet my thoughts, but they just keep coming. I feel like I can never escape the noise in my head." Zenji smiled kindly at her. "It is not about forcing your thoughts away, Yumi. It is about allowing them to come and go without attachment. When you try to push your thoughts away, you give them power, but when you allow them to come and go, like clouds passing through the sky, they lose their hold over you. The key is to not cling to them. When the water is still, the reflection of the moon is clear. When the mind is still, the beauty of life is clear." Yumi nodded, trying to grasp what her master was saying. "So, it's not about fighting the thoughts, but about letting them pass. Like the ripples in the pond?" Zenji nodded. "Yes, exactly. The ripples come and go, but they do not last. The moon's reflection is always present, but it is only when the water is still that it can be seen clearly. When your mind is still, you will see the beauty of life, just as you see the beauty of the moon in the pond." Yumi sat quietly, watching the moon's reflection in the water. She realized that she had been trying to hold on to the beauty of life, to capture it and make it hers. But now, she understood that beauty could not be held. It could only be experienced when she was still, when she allowed the present moment to flow naturally without trying to control it. As she sat there, a sense of calm began to fill her heart. She felt the quiet of the night around her, the stillness of the pond, and the gentle glow of the moon. She didn't need to hold on to the beauty of the moon anymore. She could simply be present with it, letting it be as it was. And in that acceptance, she felt a deep sense of peace. "Master," Yumi said softly, "I think I understand now. I don't need to chase beauty. I don't need to capture it. I just need to be still and let it come to me." Zenji smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "Yes, Yumi. When you stop trying to capture beauty, you will see that it is already all around you. It is always there, in every moment, in every breath. Just like the moon in the sky, beauty is constant. It is only when the mind is still, like the pond, that you can experience it clearly." Yumi sat in silence for a long time, feeling the stillness of the pond and the quiet of the night. She understood now that peace and beauty were not things to be sought after or grasped. They were already present, like the moon in the sky. She only needed to quiet her mind, to let go of her attachment to thoughts and distractions, and to simply be present. As she returned to the temple later that night, Yumi felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had learned that beauty and peace were not things to be chased, but things to be received, to be accepted in the stillness of the present moment. The moon had always been there, waiting for her to see it. All she needed to do was be still enough to notice. In the days that followed, Yumi continued her practice, learning to still her mind and accept the present moment. She no longer struggled to capture the beauty of the world. She simply allowed it to be, trusting that when her mind was calm, the beauty would always arise naturally, just as the moon reflects perfectly on a still pond. Hoshin was an old monk, known not only for his age, but for the deep peace that seemed to radiate from him. He had lived at the temple for many years, spending most of his days in quiet meditation beneath the shade of a centuries-old tree. The tree stood at the edge of the temple grounds, its bark worn with age, its roots deep in the earth. Over the years, it had grown tall and strong, with branches that stretched high into the sky. It had weathered storms, droughts, and the changing seasons, yet it remained rooted, steadfast in its place. One morning, as the sun began to rise and cast its golden light over the land, a young monk named Haruto approached Hoshin as he sat beneath the tree. Haruto had often seen his master meditating under the tree, and he had always been curious about it. The tree was ancient, much older than any monk or even the temple itself. It seemed to hold a quiet strength, a kind of wisdom that Haruto could not fully understand. He felt drawn to it, as though there was something about the tree that held the answers to the questions that often troubled his mind. "Master Hoshin," Haruto said as he sat down beside the old monk, "I've been watching you meditate under this tree for a long time. It is such an ancient tree. What wisdom does it offer? What does it teach you?" Hoshin opened his eyes slowly, his gaze soft but full of understanding. He looked at the young monk for a moment, then turned his gaze back toward the tree, its branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. The tree seemed to be alive, its presence calm and unshaken by the world around it. "The tree offers much wisdom, Haruto," Hoshin said in a quiet voice. "But it does not speak with words. It speaks through its being." Haruto looked at the tree, his eyes searching for something, for some hidden meaning in its form. "But master, the tree does not move, it does not change. It is just there, standing in the same place year after year. How can that be wisdom?" Hoshin smiled, his face peaceful as he looked at the tree. "The tree does not try to grow. It does not try to change. It simply exists in its form, rooted in the present. The tree does not fight against the winds or the storms that come. It does not resist the changing seasons. It accepts life as it is in each moment, and that is its lesson." Haruto sat quietly, trying to understand. He had always believed that growth and change were necessary for progress. He had been taught that a monk's path was one of constant striving, always seeking to improve and to reach new heights. But now, Hoshin was telling him that the tree did not strive, it did not fight or resist, it simply was. How could that be the key to wisdom? Hoshin continued, "The tree teaches us that life is not something we must force or control. We do not need to try to make things happen or push for change. Life moves in its own rhythm, just as the tree grows in its own time. The tree does not hurry to grow, nor does it hold on to the past. It simply accepts the present moment and grows in the way that it is meant to." Haruto thought deeply about this. He had always tried to force himself to grow, to achieve something, to be better. His mind was often full of desires, and he had spent so much time trying to shape his life into something he thought it should be. He had never considered that growth might come from simply being present, from accepting the present moment without trying to change it. "But master," Haruto said, his voice filled with confusion, "if the tree does not strive to grow, how does it become so strong, so tall?" Hoshin smiled again, and his eyes sparkled with quiet wisdom. "The tree grows because it is rooted deeply in the earth. Its strength comes not from forcing itself to grow, but from its deep connection to the present moment. The roots of the tree are firmly planted in the soil, and through that connection, it draws nourishment. It grows steadily, not in haste, but with patience. The tree's growth is natural, not forced." Haruto thought about this for a moment. The tree did not force itself to grow. It did not struggle to become something it was not. It simply accepted the nourishment it received, and it grew in its own time, in harmony with the world around it. It was a reminder that growth did not always have to come through effort. Sometimes, growth came through patience and acceptance. Hoshin continued, "In the same way, you too must learn to be rooted in the present. You must accept each moment as it is, without resistance. When you fight against the present, when you try to force things to be different, you create tension and struggle. But when you are rooted in the moment, When you are present with life as it is, you will find that you grow naturally, just as the tree grows. Growth comes not from striving, but from acceptance. Haruto sat quietly, his mind slowly opening to this new understanding. He had always believed that growth meant pushing forward, that he needed to force himself to be better, to be more. But now, he saw that true growth came from being present, from accepting the moment without resistance. The tree did not try to force its growth, it simply allowed it to unfold naturally. As they sat together in the shade of the tree, Haruto asked, "Master, what happens when the tree faces a storm, or when the seasons change? Doesn't that disturb it?" Hoshin nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, the tree faces storms, and the seasons change, but the tree does not resist the changes. It bends with the wind, and it remains still during the calm. It does not fight the storm, and it does not cling to the warmth of summer when the cold of winter comes. The tree accepts each season as it comes, knowing that each moment is part of the natural cycle of life. It does not fear change because it knows that change is inevitable. The key is to be like the tree, to remain rooted in the present, no matter what comes." Haruto understood now that life, like the tree, was full of change. There would be storms and challenges, just as there would be moments of calm and warmth. The key was not to fear the changes, but to accept them, to be rooted in the present and allow life to unfold naturally. By resisting change, he had only created more suffering for himself. But by accepting each moment as it came, he could live in peace, just as the tree did. "Master, I see now," Haruto said softly. "I have been so focused on changing and becoming something else that I have forgotten to accept the present moment. I have been fighting against the natural flow of life. But now I see that true strength comes from accepting the present as it is, just as the tree accepts the seasons." Hoshin smiled, his face peaceful and serene. "Yes, Haruto, the tree's strength comes from its roots in the present. It does not try to change the wind or the rain. It simply accepts them, knowing that they are part of the flow of life. When you are rooted in the present, when you stop resisting what is, you too will find peace and strength." As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the garden, Haruto sat in silence, reflecting on the wisdom of the tree and the lessons his master had shared with him. He no longer needed to fight against the flow of life. He did not need to strive or force his growth. Like the tree, he could simply accept the present moment, trusting that he would grow in his own time. Over the following weeks, Haruto practiced the lessons he had learned from the old tree. He spent more time meditating beneath its branches, allowing himself to be still, to be rooted in the present. He let go of his need to control his life and instead focused on accepting each moment as it came. He stopped resisting the challenges that arose and embraced them as part of the natural flow of life. And in doing so, he began to feel a sense of peace he had never known before. One day, when Haruto was sitting beneath the tree, Master Hoshin approached him. He looked at Haruto with quiet approval and said, "You are learning well, my student. You are beginning to understand the way of acceptance. The tree teaches us that life flows naturally when we stop resisting. Now, you too are flowing with life, not forcing or striving, but accepting each moment as it comes." Haruto nodded, his heart full of gratitude. He understood now that life, like the tree, did not need to be controlled. The strength came from being rooted in the present, from accepting the changes and challenges that came without fear or resistance. He no longer needed to struggle to grow, he simply needed to be present. And in that presence, growth would come naturally. And so, Haruto continued his path, walking with the wisdom of the tree, rooted in the present moment, accepting whatever life brought him, and trusting that he would grow in his own time. The lesson of the tree would stay with him always, guiding him through the seasons of life with calm and peace. Eiko, a young mother, had spent many sleepless nights caring for her infant son. The child was beautiful, and she loved him deeply. But his constant crying wore on her. Day after day, the crying seemed endless. Aiko had tried everything she could think of to comfort him, feeding, rocking, singing softly, and even taking him outside in the hope that the fresh air might calm him. But nothing seemed to work. Her heart ached with each cry, and she began to feel exhausted, both physically and emotionally. She longed for peace, not just for herself, but for her son. The crying felt like an endless storm, and she did not know how to calm it. One afternoon, after hours of trying to comfort her child, Aiko heard that a Zen master named Shunjo lived in the nearby village. People spoke of his wisdom, his calmness, and his ability to help those in distress. In desperation, Aiko decided to seek his counsel. She placed her son gently in his crib, wrapped herself in a cloak, and made her way through the village to the temple. Master Shunjo's temple was simple, nestled among trees and flowers that filled the air with their sweet scent. Aiko arrived at the temple, feeling both hopeful and uncertain. She had heard that Zen teachings could be life-changing, but she wasn't sure how they would help with the overwhelming stress she felt. The temple was peaceful, the kind of place where one could hear their own thoughts in silence, yet her mind was filled with the constant sound of her infant's cries. Aiko approached Master Shunjo, who was sitting quietly by a small pond, observing the reflection of the trees on the water's surface. His face was calm, his eyes soft with a deep understanding. He did not seem to notice her immediately, and Aiko sat down beside him, waiting for him to speak. After a moment, Master Shunjo turned to her, sensing her presence. "Welcome, Aiko," he said kindly. "You are troubled. How can I help you?" Aiko felt a wave of emotion rise within her. She had tried so many ways to stop her child's crying, but nothing seemed to ease the pain. "Master Shunjo," she said, her voice trembling, "I cannot stop my child from crying. It is breaking my heart. I have tried everything, but nothing helps. How can I stop his suffering?" Master Shunjo looked at her, his gaze steady and compassionate. He did not rush to offer advice, but instead sat quietly, as if allowing the question to settle in the space between them. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice gentle but clear. "Aiko," he began, "do not focus on stopping the crying, focus on accepting it. Suffering is like the wind, it blows, but it eventually passes. Embrace what is before you, not as something to be fixed, but as something to be experienced." Aiko looked at him, confused. "But Master, the crying is unbearable. How can I accept it? How can I embrace it when it is causing both of us so much pain?" Master Shunjo smiled softly, his eyes reflecting a quiet wisdom. "The crying is like the wind. It is not something you can control, but it is something you can accept. When the wind blows, you do not try to stop it. You simply acknowledge it, and you wait. It will pass. The crying of your child is the same. It is a natural part of life. It may be difficult, but it will not last forever. By accepting the moment as it is, you stop fighting against it." Aiko sat quietly, letting his words wash over her. She had never thought of the crying as something to accept. She had always viewed it as something that needed to be fixed or stopped. But now, Master Shunjo was telling her that peace would not come from controlling the situation, but from embracing it, from allowing it to be what it was. "The wind does not stop because we want it to," Master Shunjo continued. "It blows in its own time, and it moves on in its own time. So too is the crying. When you stop fighting it, when you stop trying to change it, you will find peace in the midst of it. The moment you accept what is, you free yourself from the struggle. The crying is not a problem to solve, but a reality to be embraced." Aiko's heart began to soften as she listened. It was hard to imagine not fighting against the crying, but she could feel the truth in the Master's words. Perhaps, by accepting her son's suffering, she could find peace, not in the absence of the crying, but in the presence of it. The crying was a part of life, just as the wind was a part of nature. She didn't need to fix it, she only needed to be present with it. "Master," Eiko said quietly, "how can I accept the crying when it feels so painful? How can I be at peace when the suffering seems so much?" Master Shunjo looked at her kindly. "Acceptance does not mean that you stop feeling, it means that you stop resisting. You can feel the pain, you can feel the frustration, but you do not need to add to it by fighting against it. Embrace the moment as it is, without judgment. The crying is not wrong, it is not something to be avoided, it is simply what is happening now." Eiko closed her eyes, reflecting on the simplicity of his words. She had always thought that she needed to stop the crying to find peace. But now, she saw that peace could come even in the midst of the crying, when she stopped struggling against it. It was the resistance, the need to change the moment, that caused her suffering. By letting go of that resistance, she could find a deeper acceptance, a peace that was not dependent on the absence of pain. "Master, I will try," Eiko said softly, a sense of resolve beginning to form within her. "I will stop fighting the crying. I will accept it." Master Shunjo nodded. "In that acceptance, you will find peace. Remember, suffering is like the wind, it comes and goes. When you embrace what is, you release the burden of resistance. You allow yourself to be at peace, even in the most difficult moments." Eiko stood up, bowing to Master Shunjo in gratitude. "Thank you, Master. I understand now. I will accept the crying, and in doing so, I will find peace." The next morning, Eiko returned home, feeling lighter. When her son began to cry, she did not try to stop him. Instead, she embraced the moment as it was. She held him gently, allowing herself to feel the frustration, the pain, but also allowing herself to be present with him. She did not fight against the crying, she simply allowed it to be, knowing that it would pass. As the days went by, Eiko found that her mind became calmer. The crying no longer felt like a burden to be fixed. It was simply a part of life, a moment to be experienced. And as she accepted the crying, she found that her heart became more peaceful. The suffering did not go away, but her resistance to it had faded, and in that release, she found a quiet acceptance. One day, a few weeks later, Eiko sat with her son in her arms, and she realized that the crying had stopped. It was no longer a constant part of her life. But even when the crying came, she no longer felt distressed. She had learned the lesson of acceptance, and that had brought her peace. When Eiko spoke with others in the village, she shared the wisdom she had received from Master Shunjo. "Suffering is like the wind," she would say. "It blows, but it eventually passes. We do not need to stop the suffering, we simply need to accept it and let it pass in its own time." And with that, Eiko's life became filled with a quiet peace. She had learned that by embracing life as it was, without resistance, she could find peace in every moment, no matter what came her way. Years later, when people came to her seeking wisdom, she would smile gently and say, "Acceptance is the key to peace. When you stop resisting, when you embrace what is, you will find that peace arises naturally, just as the wind eventually passes." The wisdom of Master Shunjo lived on through her, teaching others to accept life as it is, and to find peace even in the midst of pain. As we've seen through these beautiful Zen stories, acceptance and flow are the keys to finding peace amidst life's struggles. Whether it's embracing imperfection like the broken pot, letting go of yesterday's burdens, or simply accepting life as it unfolds, true peace comes when we stop fighting the present moment. Just like the flower that blooms without force, the river that flows effortlessly, and the monkey who finally lets go of the chase, we too can find peace when we stop resisting and accept things as they are. Take a moment today to reflect on your own life. What are you struggling against? What can you embrace just as it is? Let go of the need to control, and let the flow of life carry you to where you are meant to be. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did these stories teach you? Share your reflections in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful Zen wisdom to help you live in peace and harmony. Let's continue this journey together.